He divorced her on her birthday. A mysterious man saw her tears and whispered, "Will you marry me?" Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The morning light filtered through the bakery's front window, casting golden streaks across the worn wooden counter where Julia Renee Carter kneaded dough with practiced hands. Her fingers, dusted with flour, moved in a rhythmic dance she'd performed thousands of times before. At 33, she'd spent more hours in this kitchen than she could count, transforming simple ingredients into comfort that warmed the neighborhood's mornings. "Morning, Mrs. Peterson," Julia called out, her amber-brown eyes crinkling at the corners as the bells above the door announced her first customer of the day. "Your sourdough's still warm." The elderly woman shuffled in, bringing with her the crisp October air. "You're an angel, Julia. Don't know what we'd do without your grandmother's recipes keeping us all fed and happy." Julia's fingers paused briefly on the dough, her grandmother's absence still a tender spot after all these years. The small bakery, with its mint-green walls and the old cash register that sometimes stuck on the number 7, was more than just her inheritance. It was her anchor, her purpose, her escape. She tucked a stray curl back into her messy bun, leaving a streak of flour across her brown skin. The morning routine grounded her, checking the proofing bread, arranging pastries in the display case by color, a habit she'd developed during anxious moments, and wiping down the counter until it gleamed. Today, she found herself cleaning that counter for the 3rd time in an hour. "You're going to wear a hole right through it," came a familiar voice, rich with amusement. Nadine Joy James stood in the doorway, her purple braids catching the light, wearing a yellow jumpsuit that somehow made the dreary morning brighter. "And don't tell me you're stress baking again." Julia glanced at the 4 trays of chocolate chip cookies cooling on the rack. "I'm not stress baking." Nadine raised an eyebrow, her dark skin glowing with perpetual confidence. "And I suppose those aren't your something's wrong cookies? The ones with the extra vanilla?" Before Julia could respond, the bakery door chimed again. Her heart stuttered as her husband, Michael, walked in. He wore his typical corporate attire, pressed suit, gleaming shoes, and an expression that had grown increasingly distant over the past year. "Michael," Julia wiped her hands on her apron, "what are you doing here? I thought you had that big meeting. We need to talk." His voice was flat, emotionless. He placed a manila envelope on the counter she'd just cleaned. Julia stared at it, her throat tightening. "What's this?" "Divorce papers." He didn't meet her eyes. "My lawyer drew them up. It's better this way." The world tilted. Julia gripped the edge of the counter, leaving fingerprints in the flour dusting its surface. "Better." The word came out as a whisper. "Today? You're doing this today?" Nadine stepped forward, her presence radiating protective fury. "On her birthday? Are you serious right now?" Michael finally looked up, his expression a practiced mask of corporate indifference. "I have a meeting at 10. If you could sign them, get out." Nadine's voice cut through the bakery like a blade. He left the envelope and walked out, the cheerful door chimes a mockery of the moment. Julia stood frozen, her hands trembling against the counter. The morning light suddenly seemed harsh, exposing every crack in the life she'd built. She'd known things weren't perfect, had felt Michael's growing distance, but this brutal efficiency made her wonder if she'd ever really known him at all. "Jules," Nadine started, reaching for her. "I need air." Julia untied her apron with shaking fingers. "Can you? I'll watch the shop." "Go." Julia stumbled out into the morning, barely registering the rain that had begun to fall. Her feet carried her down familiar streets, now turned strange by grief. Rain mixed with tears on her cheeks as she walked, each step taking her further from the warmth of her bakery, from the life she thought she'd had. She ended up in Washington Square Park, where the rain had chased away the usual crowd of students and tourists. Water dripped from the arch, and Julia stood there, letting herself be soaked, wondering how she'd become so lost in her own life. She'd given everything, her time, her understanding, her silence when Michael worked late, her acceptance when he grew cold. She'd poured herself into making others happy, into being what everyone needed, until she'd forgotten how to ask for what she needed herself. "Julia." The voice hit her like a physical force. Deep, familiar, impossible. She turned slowly, her wet curls clinging to her face. There he stood, tall and solid in the rain, Elias Damian Monroe. His grey-green eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He looked different, older, more refined than the impulsive young man who disappeared from her life over a decade ago. His light brown hair was darker with rain, and that scar along his jawline stood out stark against his skin. He wore simple dark jeans and a leather jacket, but it was the way he looked at her, like she was both a miracle and a wound, that made her heart stutter. Elias? His name felt strange on her tongue after so many years of careful silence. He took a step closer, and she noticed his hand go to the chain at his neck, that nervous gesture she remembered so well. Rain dripped from his jaw as he studied her face. Then, without preamble or explanation, he said words that cracked the world open. "Marry me." Julia stared at him, certain she'd finally lost her mind. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I don't deserve to ask. I know I have no right, but I'm asking." She laughed, a sound caught between hysteria and disbelief. "I just got served divorce papers. My husband, ex-husband, whatever he is, did it on my birthday, in my bakery. And now you're here, after 11 years of silence, asking me to marry you." "Yes." His simple answer hung in the rain between them. "You're crazy." She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her. "I'm not the scared kid who ran anymore, Jules." The old nickname made her flinch. "I'm asking because I've spent 11 years knowing exactly what I lost, what I threw away. And I'm done wasting time." She faced him again. Anger and something else, something dangerous and warm, burning in her chest. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to disappear for over a decade and then just—" "I know." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tip her head back to maintain eye contact. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking for one anyway." The rain fell harder around them, and Julia felt herself standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. In the space of a single morning, her carefully constructed world had shattered, and here, in the ruins, stood the man who'd first taught her both the beauty and danger of loving someone completely. "Why now?" she whispered. His hand tightened on the chain at his neck. "Because I finally can. Because I finally dealt with everything that made me run. Because—" He paused, and she saw the cost of the words in his eyes. "Because I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." Julia stood in the rain, soaked to the skin, her birthday crumbling around her, and stared at the impossible choice before her. The safe answer was no. The sane answer was no. But her heart, traitorous and alive for the first time in years, wasn't interested in safe or sane. She opened her mouth to respond, and the world held its breath. Julia's fingers traced the rim of her coffee mug at Nadine's kitchen table, the ceramic long since gone cold. Rain still pattered against the windows, but at least here she was dry, wrapped in one of Nadine's oversized sweaters, her wet clothes tumbling in the dryer down the hall. "Let me get this straight." Nadine paced the length of her bright kitchen, her yellow jumpsuit a stark contrast to the grey day outside. "Your trash husband serves you divorce papers on your birthday. You go walking in the rain like some romantic tragedy heroine, and then the Elias Munro appears out of nowhere and proposes." "That's what happened." Julia's voice sounded distant, even to her own ears. "And you said—" "Nothing." Julia closed her eyes, remembering the moment. "I ran." Nadine stopped pacing. "You ran. What else was I supposed to do?" Julia's voice cracked. "Stand there in the rain and say yes to the man who broke my heart 11 years ago, on the same day my marriage ended." "Fair point." Nadine pulled out a chair and sat down, her expression softening. "Say, but honey, we both know you never really got over him." The truth of those words stung. Julia had tried. God, how she'd tried. She'd packed away every memory, every photograph, every reminder of Elias into a box she'd shoved into the furthest corner of her closet. She'd built a new life, married a man who seemed stable and predictable, safe, the opposite of everything Elias had been. And look how well that had turned out. "It doesn't matter," Julia said, more to herself than to Nadine. "The past is the past." "Is it?" Nadine leaned forward. "Because that past just showed up in the rain and asked you to marry him. And don't think I haven't noticed you're still wearing his necklace." Julia's hand automatically went to the delicate chain hidden beneath her borrowed sweater. The small compass pendant had rested against her heart for so long, she sometimes forgot it was there. "It's just jewelry." "Right. Just like that tattoo on his neck is just coordinates." Nadine's voice gentled. "Talk to me, Jules. What really happened 11 years ago? You never told me the whole story." Julia stared into her cold coffee, watching the light play across its surface. The memories she'd tried so hard to bury rose up like ghosts. "We were young," she began. "So young. I was 22, working at Gran's bakery, trying to figure out what I wanted from life. He was 25, full of dreams about changing the world." A small smile touched her lips despite herself. He used to come in every morning for coffee and a chocolate croissant, always said they reminded him of Paris even though he'd never been. "Love at first pastry?" Nadine's teasing tone carried a note of understanding. Something like that. Julia remembered those early days with painful clarity. He was different from anyone I'd ever met, intense, but gentle. He'd sit at the counter and tell me about the books he was reading, the places he wanted to see. He had this way of making me feel like I was the most fascinating person in the world. She paused, the weight of memory pressing against her chest. We fell hard and fast. Too fast, maybe. 6 months into, we were talking about marriage, about traveling together, about building a life. He even got those coordinates tattooed, the exact spot where we first met, right there at the bakery counter. So what went wrong? Julia's fingers tightened around her mug. Everything changed after his father died. Elias started pulling away, staying out late, not answering his phone. Then one day, he just vanished. No note, no explanation. Just gone. The pain of it, dulled by time but never truly healed, throbbed anew. I tried everything to find him. Called hospitals, police stations, his friends. Nobody knew anything. Or if they did, they weren't telling. "And now he's back," Nadine said softly, saying he's changed, that he dealt with whatever made him run. Julia laughed, but the sound held no humor. "He said he never stopped loving me. Can you believe that? 11 years of silence, and he expects me to believe he loved me the whole time. Did you believe him?" The question hung in the air between them. Julia thought about the way Elias had looked at her in the rain, the raw honesty in his voice when he'd spoken. "I don't know what to believe anymore." The dryer buzzed down the hall, making them both jump. Nadine rose to get Julia's clothes, but paused at the kitchen doorway. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're scared. Not of Elias, but of the fact that part of you wants to say yes." Julia opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come, because Nadine was right. There was a part of her, a part she'd tried to silence for 11 years, that had looked at Elias in the rain and wanted to fall all over again. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. Her heart jumped as she read the text. "I know I have no right to ask for your time, but please let me explain. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow at sunset. I'll be by the 91st Street garden." "Is it him?" Nadine asked, returning with Julia's now warm clothes. Julia nodded and unable to speak. "Are you going to go?" "I shouldn't." Julia stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the delete button. It's crazy to even consider it. Maybe. Nadine set the clothes down and squeezed Julia's shoulder, but sometimes crazy is exactly what we need to wake us up. Julia changed back into her own clothes, her mind racing. The practical thing would be to delete the message, to go back to her bakery, to the life she knew, to the safety of routine. She had divorce papers to deal with, a business to run, a heart to protect. But as she hugged Nadine goodbye and stepped out into the now clearing sky, she knew she was going to meet him, because beyond all reason, beyond all logic and self-preservation, she needed to know why he left, why he came back, why, after all these years, her heart still recognized his voice. The compass pendant felt heavy against her skin as she walked home. She'd kept it all these years, telling herself it was just a reminder of youth, of passion, of what happens when you trust too easily. Now she wondered if it had been something else all along, a beacon, guiding him back to her. Or maybe, she thought, as the setting sun painted the wet streets gold, guiding her back to herself. The 91st Street garden glowed in the setting sun, its October blooms painting the air with the last breath of summer. Julia walked slowly along the path, her boots crunching on fallen leaves. She'd changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple burgundy sweater dress and leather boots, practical enough to feel like herself, but nice enough to show she'd made an effort, not that she was trying to impress him. At least that's what she kept telling herself. She spotted him before he saw her. Elias stood near a wooden bench, one hand in the pocket of his dark jeans, the other absently touching the chain at his neck. The fading sunlight caught the silver in his light brown hair. Had that been there 11 years ago? The familiar gesture with the necklace made her throat tight. Some things, it seemed, never changed. He turned as she approached, and the look in his grey-green eyes nearly stopped her in her tracks. Relief, fear, hope, emotions crashed across his face before he managed to school his features into something calmer. "You came," he said softly. "I almost didn't." Julia remained standing, maintaining a safe distance. "Start talking, Elias. Why did you leave?" He gestured to the bench. "Will you sit, please?" She hesitated, then perched on the edge of the bench, her spine straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Elias sat too, leaving careful space between them. "I've rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times," he began, his voice rough. "But now that you're here," he ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so achingly familiar it made Julia's heart clench. "The truth," she insisted. "I deserve that much." "Yes, you do." He took a deep breath. "It was my mother." Julia frowned. She remembered Elias's mother only vaguely, a quiet woman who'd attended his father's funeral in a daze, barely speaking to anyone. "After Dad died," Elias continued, "she started changing. At first, it was small things, calling me at odd hours, convinced someone was following her, rearranging the furniture in the middle of the night because the patterns were speaking to her." His hand tightened on the chain at his neck. Then she started disappearing. I'd find her wandering in different parts of the city, confused, terrified. The doctors finally diagnosed her with severe schizophrenia. Julia's breath caught. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared, terrified, actually." He turned to face her fully. "Mental illness runs in my family. My grandmother had it too. I watched my father struggle with the guilt of passing it to my mother, watched it tear their marriage apart. And there I was planning a future with you, knowing I might carry the same genes." "That wasn't your choice to make," Julia said, anger coloring her voice. "I had a right to know, to decide for myself." "You're right." The simple admission surprised her. "I was young and stupid and terrified. Instead of trusting you, I convinced myself I was protecting you. Mom needed full-time care, and I couldn't bear the thought of you watching me turn into my father, consumed by guilt and responsibility. So you just disappeared." The pain of that abandonment rose fresh in her throat. "Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "I think about it every day." His voice cracked. "I moved Mom to a facility in Boston, spent years helping her stabilize, learning about her condition. Every morning, I'd buy a chocolate croissant, trying to recreate the taste of yours. Every night, I'd dream about coming back, explaining everything. But the longer I stayed away, the harder it became." Julia stood abruptly, needing space, needing air. The garden paths stretched before her, and she walked a few steps away, feeling Elias's eyes on her back. "Why now?" she asked without turning. "Why come back after all this time?" She heard him stand, but he didn't approach. "Mom's doing better. She's been stable for 2 years now, living in a supervised community where she's happy, making art, having a life. And He paused. "I finally stopped running from myself, got therapy, dealt with my fears about heredity and responsibility, learned that protecting someone doesn't mean making choices for them." Julia turned to face him, tears burning in her eyes. "And what? You thought you'd just walk back into my life and propose?" "No." He took a careful step forward. "I came back to apologize, to explain, to see if you'd let me try to make amends, somehow. But then I saw you in the rain, looking like every dream I've had for 11 years, and He shook his head. The words just came out. "I know it was crazy. I know I have no right." "No right," Julia repeated, wiping angrily at her cheeks. "You're damn right about that. Do you know what it's like to be left without a word? To wake up every day wondering what you did wrong? To finally convince yourself to move on? To marry someone else, only to have him serve you divorce papers on your birthday? I'm sorry." The words seemed torn from his chest. "God, Jules, I'm so sorry. For everything." She looked at him, then, really looked. The years had changed him. Lines around his eyes, a maturity in his bearing, that touch of silver in his hair. But underneath it all, she saw echoes of the young man who'd sat at her counter every morning, who'd read poetry to her in the park, who'd kissed her like she was precious and infinite. "The necklace," she said suddenly, touching her own compass pendant. "You're still wearing yours?" His hand went to the chain, pulling it out to reveal an identical compass. "Never took it off. It reminded me of where I belonged, even when I was too scared to come home." The word home hung between them, heavy with meaning. Julia felt tears threatening again and turned back to the garden, watching the sun paint the flowers in shades of gold and shadow. "I have a life here," she said finally, "a business to run, friends, Responsibilities. I know. I'm not the same person I was 11 years ago. Neither am I. His voice was closer now, though he still didn't touch her. I'm not asking for everything back. I'm not even asking for forgiveness, though I hope someday you might consider it. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I am now, to learn who you've become. Julia closed her eyes, feeling the evening breeze on her face. The practical thing would be to walk away, to thank him for the explanation, and close this chapter of her life for good. But when had love ever been practical? Coffee, she said, opening her eyes. What? We can start with coffee. She turned to face him. Not at my bakery, neutral territory, and I'm not promising anything. The hope that blazed across his face made her heart stumble. Coffee, he repeated, like it was the most beautiful word he'd ever heard. And Elias? She took a step closer, close enough to see the flecks of blue in his grey-green eyes. If you ever disappear on me again, I will hunt you down myself, and it won't be pretty. A smile tugged at his lips, that crooked, gentle smile she'd tried so hard to forget. I'm done running, Jules, I promise. As they stood in the fading light of the garden, autumn flowers blooming around them like stars, Julia felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, the beginning of understanding. And for now, that would have to be enough. The manila envelope sat untouched on Julia's kitchen counter, a persistent reminder of endings. Morning sunlight streamed through her apartment windows, catching on the dust motes dancing in the air. She'd been up since 4, stress baking enough pastries to feed half of Manhattan, but she couldn't bring herself to open those papers. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elias. Good morning. Still on for coffee at 2? Julia's fingers hovered over the screen. They'd been texting for 3 days since the garden, careful messages that felt like testing ice on a frozen lake, each word measured, each response considered. Yes, she typed back. Just need to meet with my lawyer first. His reply came quickly. Want company afterward? No pressure. She smiled despite herself. He'd been doing that, offering support while carefully maintaining boundaries. It was so different from the impulsive boy she'd known, who'd wear his heart on his sleeve and push for more, always more. I'll let you know, she responded, then added, thanks for asking. The doorbell rang, startling her. Nadine burst in without waiting for an answer, carrying a massive iced coffee and a determined expression. Okay, honey, enough hiding. She set the coffee down and eyed the mountain of baked goods covering every surface. Though I see you've been busy. I'm not hiding, Julia protested. I have a lawyer appointment at 10. And you've what? Baked every recipe in your grandmother's cookbook to avoid thinking about it. Nadine picked up a still warm cinnamon roll. Not that I'm complaining. Julia slumped against the counter. What am I doing, Nadine? My marriage is ending. I'm meeting Elias for coffee later. Everything's... She gestured helplessly at the chaos of flour and sugar around her. Everything's changing, Nadine finished gently. That's not always bad, you know. Michael's lawyer called yesterday. He's not contesting anything, the apartment, the saving. Says he just wants it done quickly. Julia's laugh held no humor. Apparently, he's been seeing someone at his firm. For months. That rat bastard. Nadine's face darkened. Want me to key his car because I will absolutely key his car? No. Julia straightened, brushing flour from her apron. I want to handle this with dignity. I want to... She trailed off, realizing something. I want to choose myself for once. Nadine's expression softened. So now that's what I like to hear. 2 hours later, Julia sat across from her lawyer, Lauren Winters, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who radiated competence. The terms are actually quite favorable, Lauren said, reviewing the papers. He's not claiming any part of the bakery, which is your premarital asset anyway. The apartment and joint savings will be split, with him taking slightly less than half, I assume out of guilt. Julia nodded, her fingers twisting the compass pendant beneath her blouse. I just want it over. Understandable. Lauren leaned forward. But Julia, don't let your desire for a quick resolution lead you to settle for less than you deserve. Those late nights he claimed to be working. He was building a relationship with a colleague. That matters in divorce proceedings. I don't want to fight. Julia met the lawyer's gaze steadily. I don't want his guilt money or a messy court battle. I want to move forward. Lauren studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You know, most clients come in here wanting blood. It's refreshing to see someone choosing peace. After signing the initial papers and scheduling follow-up appointments, Julia found herself walking through the city streets, feeling strangely light. Her phone buzzed with another text from Elias. Still good for coffee. She checked the time, 1:30. The coffee shop they'd agreed on was just a few blocks away. On my way, she typed, got out of the lawyer's early. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups. He stood as she approached, and she noticed he was wearing a soft grey sweater that brought out his eyes. I hope it's okay, he said, gesturing to the cups. I remembered your order. Oat milk latte with an extra shot. Julia felt something warm unfurl in her chest. You remembered that? I remember everything about you, Jules. He said it simply, without drama or expectation. She sat down, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. That could be creepy, you know. A smile tugged at his lips. Only if I recite your old street address or your high school locker combination, which was 14 to 2703, they said in unison, then laughed, breaking some of the tension. How was the lawyer? He asked after a moment. Julia took a sip of her perfectly made latte. Surprisingly okay. Michael's making it easy. Too easy, maybe. You deserve easy, Elias said quietly. After everything. She looked at him then, really looked. The sunlight from the cafe window caught the silver in his hair, highlighted the familiar curve of his jaw, the newer lines around his eyes. He'd changed, but somehow remained essentially himself, like a favorite book rebound in new leather. I've been thinking, she said carefully, about what you said in the garden, about protecting people by making choices for them. He stilled, waiting. I did that too, you know. With Michael, I chose someone safe, predictable, someone who couldn't hurt me the way. She took a breath. The way you did. I thought I was protecting myself, but really, I was just hiding. Jules, let me finish. She set down her cup. I'm not ready for big gestures or promises. I'm not ready for anything, really. But I think I'd like to stop hiding. The hope that flickered across his face made her heart skip. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to know you again. The real you, not the memory I've been carrying around, but slowly, on my terms. I can do slow, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I can do glacial if that's what you need. Good. She took another sip of coffee, hiding her own smile. Because right now, I need to focus on the bakery, on building my own life again. The bakery. Something shifted in his expression. How is it, really? Julia sighed. Honestly, it's struggling. The rent keeps going up, and there's this fancy new patisserie opening 2 blocks away. I've been dipping into my savings just to keep things running. Let me help, he said immediately, then held up a hand when she started to protest. Not with money, but I do have some experience in business development. Maybe I could look at your books, suggest some strategies. She wanted to refuse automatically, to maintain that careful distance. But the practical part of her, the part that stayed up nights worrying about payroll and suppliers, recognized a lifeline when she saw one. Just business advice, she said firmly. Just business advice, he agreed. Though I won't say no to the occasional chocolate croissant. As they continued talking, the afternoon light softening around them, Julia felt something else softening too, the hard shell of protection she'd built around her heart. It wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, it had room for a window. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nadine. Did you murder him and need help hiding the body? Julia smiled, typing back, no murder necessary. Yet, she looked up to find Elias watching her with that intense focus she remembered so well. But now it felt different, not consuming, but patient, like he'd learned, finally, that love wasn't about possession, but about presence. What? She asked. Nothing, he smiled, and for a moment she saw echoes of both who he'd been and who he'd become. I just really missed your smile. Outside the cafe window, New York flowed past in its eternal rhythm. But here, in this moment, Julia felt time slow down. Not stopping, not rewinding, but finding its own new pace. Like bread dough rising. You couldn't rush it, couldn't force it. You just had to trust the process, trust the ingredients, trust that something whole would emerge from all these broken pieces. She had no idea what that something would be, but for the first time in a long time, she was curious to find out. You've got to be kidding me. Julia stared at the stack of receipts and invoices spread across her tiny office desk. It was barely dawn. The bakery still quiet except for the hum of the ovens preheating. This can't be right. Elias leaned against the doorframe, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He'd been at the bakery since 5 a.m., insisting on seeing her morning routine to understand the business better. The numbers don't lie, Jules. You're paying almost double what you should for basic supplies. She ran her fingers through her curls, forgetting about the flour on her hands. But I've been using the same suppliers for years, since Gran's time, and they've been slowly raising prices, betting on your loyalty. He moved closer, pointing to specific invoices. Look, basic flour, sugar, butter, all marked up way beyond market rate. Your grandmother probably had better terms, but they've been creeping up the cost since I took over, Julia finished, feeling a familiar twist of inadequacy in her stomach. I should have noticed. Hey, his voice softened. You were focusing on the actual baking, on keeping your customers happy. That's not a bad thing. He paused, and she could feel him choosing his next words carefully. Awesome, but maybe it's time to let someone help with the business side. Julia looked up at him, suddenly very aware of how close he was standing. In the week since their coffee shop meeting, he'd been showing up every morning, armed with spreadsheets and business strategies. It was strange seeing him in her space again, but in such a different role. I don't need saving, Elias. No, you don't. He stepped back, giving her space. Fair, but you do need better supplier contracts, and maybe a website that wasn't built in 2010. She glanced at the ancient desktop computer in the corner, its screen displaying her outdated website. That bad, huh? Let's just say MySpace called. They want their design back. Despite herself, Julia laughed. The sound echoed in the small office, and something in Elias's expression shifted, softened. The moment was broken by rapid footsteps, and Nadine's voice calling out, "Jules, you back here? Because you need to see this." Julia followed Nadine to the front of the bakery, Elias close behind. Through the window, she could see workers putting up a massive sign on the building 2 blocks down. Sweet Society, Luxury Patisserie and Cafe. They're opening next week, Nadine said, her voice tight with concern. And look, she held up her phone, displaying their sleek website. They're offering opening day specials that are below your regular prices. Julia felt her stomach drop. They can afford to take a loss to build clientele. We can't. No, Elias said thoughtfully, but we can offer something they can't. Both women turned to look at him. History, authenticity. He gestured around the bakery with its worn wooden counters and vintage display cases. Fair, this place has been here for what, 3 generations? 4, Julia corrected automatically. My great-grandmother started it. Exactly. Sweet Society can have all the fancy packaging they want, but they can't manufacture soul. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. You still have your grandmother's original recipes, right? Of course. They're in the old recipe box in my office. And stories, photos, memories of how this place used to be. Julia nodded slowly, beginning to see where he was going. Gran used to tell me about how, during the blackout in '77, she kept baking using a gas oven, handed out free bread to everyone in the neighborhood. That's what I'm talking about. Elias's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. We don't compete on their level. We remind people why they've been coming here for generations. We tell your story. Our story, Nadine corrected, giving Julia a meaningful look. Julia ignored her friend's implication, focusing on the practical. That sounds great, but it doesn't solve our immediate problem. We need to cut costs and increase revenue now. Already working on it. Elias showed them his phone screen, displaying a list of supplier contacts. These are companies I've worked with before. Smaller, family-owned businesses that offer better prices than your current suppliers. And they're all local, which fits our authenticity narrative. You've been researching suppliers for us? For you, he said quietly. And before you protest, this is just information. You make the final decisions. I'm just being helpful, Nadine finished. Like a normal person who cares. She gave Julia a pointed look. Unlike some people we could mention. Julia knew she meant Michael, who had never shown any interest in the bakery beyond commenting on its modest profits. The contrast with Elias's enthusiasm and practical help was uncomfortable. Fine, she said finally. Set up meetings with the suppliers, but I'm handling the negotiations myself. Wouldn't have it any other way. Elias's smile was warm but professional. He was getting better at maintaining that careful balance. The morning crowd started trickling in, and they all fell into an unexpected rhythm. Julia at the ovens, creating the pastries that had made the bakery famous. Nadine charming customers with her natural wit. And Elias, surprisingly comfortable behind the counter, learning the regulars, names and orders. During a rare, quiet moment, Julia found herself watching him interact with Mrs. Peterson, their oldest customer, He was listening intently as she showed him photos of her new great-grandchild on her phone, his genuine interest evident in every response. "He's good with people," Nadine murmured, appearing beside her. "Really good." "He always was," Julia admitted. "That's part of what scared me, falling for him again. He makes everything seem so possible." "Maybe because things are possible." Nadine bumped her shoulder gently. "You're not 22 anymore, Jules. Neither is he. Maybe this time around you both know enough to build something real." Before Julia could respond, the door chimed again. Her heart stopped as Michael walked in, looking expensive in his tailored suit. The bakery fell quiet, tension crackling in the air. "Julia," he nodded stiffly. "I tried calling." "I've been busy." She was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "The papers are with my lawyer." "Yes, well." He shifted uncomfortably, finally noticing Elias behind the counter. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I see you're making changes already." "The bakery needs to evolve," she said simply. "Was there something specific you needed?" Michael's jaw tightened. There are some things still at the apartment. When would be a good time to collect them? I'll have them sent to your office." Julia's tone was polite but firm. "If that's all." He opened his mouth as if to say more, then thought better of it. With a curt nod, he left, the cheerful door chimes jarring in his wake. Julia realized her hands were shaking and gripped the counter to steady them. Immediately, she felt Elias's presence beside her, not touching, just there. "You okay?" he asked softly. She looked up at him, at the concern in his grey-green eyes, and felt something shift inside her. "Yeah," she said, surprised to find it was true. "I really am." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of customers and coffee, but Julia kept catching glimpses of possible futures. The bakery revitalized, her life rebuilt, her heart. Well, that part was still complicated. During the afternoon lull, she found Elias in her office again, poring over spreadsheets with intense concentration. The sunlight caught his profile, highlighting that familiar scar along his jaw, and she remembered how he'd gotten it, defending a street vendor from harassment. Back when they were young and he thought he could fix everything through sheer force of will. He looked up, catching her watching him. "And what?" "Nothing," she smiled, thinking of all the ways they'd both changed and stayed the same. "Just thank you for helping, for not pushing, for being here," he finished quietly. "Yeah." They held each other's gaze for a long moment, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Then Julia cleared her throat and pointed to the spreadsheets. "So tell me more about these suppliers." And as they bent their heads together over the numbers, planning the bakery's future, Julia felt something else taking shape, something as delicate and promising as dough, rising in a warm kitchen, waiting to become something wonderful. "And this," Julia said, carefully unfolding the yellowed paper, "was my great-grandmother's original recipe for honey lavender bread. She used to say it could cure anything from heartbreak to the common cold." Elias leaned closer, examining the elegant handwriting. They sat at Julia's kitchen table, surrounded by old recipe boxes, photographs, and newspaper clippings. Fragments of her family's legacy spread out like puzzle pieces in the warm evening light. "Her handwriting looks just like yours," he observed, glancing at Julia's own notes in the margins. "Gran made me practice for hours." Julia smiled at the memory, said a baker's handwriting should be as elegant as their pastries. They'd been at this for hours, gathering materials for the bakery's new website and social media campaign. Empty takeout containers and half-drunk cups of tea cluttered the table. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a cozy bubble around them. "Look at this one." Elias held up a faded photograph. "Is that you?" Julia peered at the image, a small girl in pigtails covered in flour, beaming at the camera from behind the bakery counter. "I was 6. It was my first time helping make the Christmas cookies. You look exactly the same when you bake now, you know." His voice was soft, that same expression of complete joy. Their eyes met across the table, and Julia felt that now familiar flutter in her stomach. Over the past 2 weeks, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm of working together, but moments like this still caught her off guard. Moments when the weight of their shared history pressed against the present. She cleared her throat, reaching for another stack of photos. "We should include the story about the wedding cake disaster of '92, the one where your grandmother saved the day." The original baker got food poisoning, and the bride was hysterical. Gran stayed up all night to recreate the entire 4-tier cake. Julia's fingers traced the edge of the photograph, showing her grandmother, exhausted but triumphant, standing beside the finished masterpiece. "That's the kind of story sweet society can't compete with," Elias said, typing notes on his laptop. Speaking of which, their opening day is tomorrow. Julia's stomach tightened. She'd been trying not to think about it. I know. Hey, Elias reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. We've got this. The new website launches tonight, the social media campaign is ready, and those recipe videos you filmed are amazing. I still can't believe you talked me into doing videos. People want authenticity, remember? And you're a natural on camera. She scoffed, but couldn't help smiling. The videos had been his idea. Short clips of her sharing family recipes and stories, showing the heart behind each creation. To her surprise, the test posts had already gained significant attention online. Oh, she suddenly remembered something. Jumping up from the table. I almost forgot. I tried that recipe you mentioned, the one your mother used to make. She went to the kitchen, returning with a covered plate. Elias's expression shifted at the mention of his mother, but he watched curiously as she set the plate down. Cinnamon sugar cookies, she said, removing the cover. You said they were her specialty before. She trailed off, watching as he picked up one of the cookies with slightly trembling fingers. The recipe had been a casual mention during one of their conversations about family traditions, but she'd noted how his voice changed when he spoke of his mother's baking. He took a bite when his eyes closed. For a moment, he looked achingly vulnerable. Jules, he said softly, opening his eyes. These are exactly right. How did you... You mentioned she used extra vanilla and a touch of nutmeg. I experimented until I got the balance right. She sat back down, trying to keep her voice light. I thought maybe we could add them to the menu. Call them memory cookies or something. The look he gave her made her heart flip. You'd do that. Well, they're good cookies. And every recipe has a story, right? That's what we're selling now. Not just pastries, but history, memory, connection. Elias set the cookie down carefully. My mum's having a good week. The doctors say she might be able to start baking again soon in the facility's kitchen. That's wonderful. Yeah? He smiled, but she could see the complex emotions behind it. She asked about you. You know. She remembers you from before. Julia's breath caught. What did you tell her? The truth, that I found you again, and that I'm trying very hard not to mess it up this time. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Nadine sending a link to Sweet Society's latest promotional post. Julia clicked it open and felt her heart sink. They're offering half-price pastries all week and free coffee. We can't match those prices. No, Elias said firmly, and we shouldn't try. Look at their photos. Everything's perfect, polished, soulless. We're selling something different. History and memory don't pay the bills, Elias. No, but they create loyalty. Trust me on this, Jules. He turned his laptop around, showing her the nearly finished website. Tomorrow, we launch your grandmother's story. We share these photos, these recipes. We remind people that they're not just buying bread, they're becoming part of a legacy. She studied the website, elegant but warm, featuring the vintage photos alongside modern shots of her baking. Her grandmother's recipes were presented like treasured heirlooms, each with its own story. It's beautiful, she admitted, but what if it's not enough? Then we'll try something else. He leaned forward, his expression intense. But I believe in this. I believe in you. A loud crack of thunder made them both jump, and Julia realized how late it had gotten. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows. You should go, she said reluctantly. It's getting worse out there. Elias began gathering his things, carefully setting aside the photos and recipes they'd chosen for the website. At the door, he paused. Jules. Thank you. For the cookies. For understanding about Mom. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He was so close, and in the dim light of her entryway, she could see every detail of his face, the tiny scar by his eyebrow, the flecks of gold in his eyes, the slight tremor in his jaw that always appeared when he was holding something back. Later, she wouldn't be sure who moved first, but suddenly his hand was cupping her cheek, and she was leaning into his touch, and the space between them was dissolving. The buzzing of his phone shattered the moment. He stepped back quickly, checking the screen. It's the facility, he said, his voice rough. I should go, she finished. Of course. We have a big day tomorrow anyway. He nodded, his hand on the doorknob. Jules. I know. She managed to smile. Fine good night, Elias. After he left, Julia stood in her kitchen, looking at the scattered remnants of their evening, the photos, the recipes, the half-eaten cookies. Everything felt charged with possibility and danger, like a cake that could either rise perfectly or collapse at the slightest disturbance. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Nadine. "How's the history project going? Any interesting developments?" Julia looked at the message, then at the cookies that tasted like memories, and typed back, "I think I'm in trouble," because falling for Elias again wouldn't be like before. This time, she knew exactly what she had to lose, and exactly how much it would hurt if history repeated itself. But as she carefully packed away her grandmother's recipes, she couldn't help wondering if some risks were worth taking, if some stories deserved a second chapter, if some loves, like some recipes, only got better with time. Julia arrived at the bakery at 3 in the morning, hours before her usual start time. The streets were still dark, the city caught in that liminal space between night and dawn. She hadn't slept much, her mind racing with thoughts of recipes, competition, and the almost kiss from the night before. The bakery's interior was dark and quiet, holding the day's possibilities like unspoken promises. She flicked on the lights, reached for her apron and froze. Elias was already there, sleeves rolled up, working at the prep station. "You're here early," she managed, her heart doing that annoying flutter thing again. He looked up, flour dusting his forearms. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get a head start on the day." He gestured to the ingredients laid out before him. "Hope you don't mind. I started the honey lavender bread. Your great-grandmother's recipe." Julia moved closer, examining his work. The dough was perfect, rising slowly in the warm kitchen. "You remembered the recipe from just seeing it yesterday?" "I remember everything important." His voice was soft, and she knew he wasn't just talking about recipes. The air between them crackled with unspoken words. Julia busied herself with checking the ovens, very aware of his presence behind her. "About last night," they both started at the same time, then laughed awkwardly. "You first," Julia said, turning to face him. Elias ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of flour that made him look endearingly human. I don't want to complicate things. The bakery needs to be our priority right now." "Right," she agreed quickly. "Absolutely. Professional boundaries." "Professional boundaries," he repeated, though his eyes lingered on her face in a way that was decidedly unprofessional. They worked in companionable silence as the night softened into dawn. Julia lost herself in the rhythm of baking, measuring, mixing, creating. She'd always felt most herself in these quiet morning hours, when possibility lived in every batch of dough. At 6, Nadine burst in carrying 3 enormous cups of coffee and a determined expression. "Okay, loves, let's show those sweet society snobs what real baking looks like." She stopped short, taking in the scene before her. Julia and Elias had transformed the bakery overnight. Fresh flowers adorned every table, vintage photos lined the walls, and the display cases were filled with an array of pastries that looked like edible art. "Well, damn," Nadine breathed. "You two have been busy." Julia gestured to the new chalkboard menu, where she'd written out the day's specials in her grandmother's elegant style. Each item came with a tiny story: the history of the honey lavender bread, the legend of the triple chocolate cookies, the romance behind the raspberry rose tarts. "The website went live at midnight," Elias added, checking his phone. "We've already got comments coming in, people sharing their own memories of the bakery." Before anyone could respond, the door chimed. Mrs. Peterson stood there, but she wasn't alone. Behind her was a line of customers stretching down the block. "Did you really think we'd let some fancy new place steal our Julia?" Mrs. Peterson said, beaming. "We've been spreading the word all week. Everyone wants to be here for the revival." Julia's vision blurred with tears as customers filled the bakery, exclaiming over the photos, pointing out faces they recognized, sharing stories of their own. Parents told children about their first taste of her grandmother's cinnamon rolls. Elderly couples remembered wedding cakes from decades past. "Try these," she heard Elias saying, offering a plate of his mother's cinnamon sugar cookies. "They're new, but they're made with history." The morning passed in a whirlwind of sales and stories. Every time Julia looked up from the ovens, the line seemed longer. Nadine worked the register like a maestro conducting an orchestra, while Elias moved between tables, collecting stories and photos from customers eager to share their connections to the bakery. Around noon, the bell chimed again. A sharp-suited woman entered, her heels clicking on the worn wooden floor. Julia recognized her from Sweet Society's website. Lauren McKinley, the owner. The bakery fell quiet as she approached the counter, her expression unreadable. She studied the display case, the vintage photos, the happy customers. "I have to admit," she said finally, "this isn't what I expected. We've been empty all morning. Everyone's been here instead." She picked up one of the story cards describing the honey lavender bread. "You can't manufacture this kind of history, can you?" "No," Julia said simply. "You can't." Lauren nodded slowly. "Would you consider a collaboration? Your history, our resources?" Julia felt Elias and Nadine tense beside her, waiting for her response. A month ago, she might have jumped at the offer, the security, the promise of easy success. "Thank you," she said. "But no, this place isn't just a business. It's a legacy. And it's not for sale." After Lauren left, Nadine whooped and hugged her. "That's my girl, standing up to the corporate vultures." But Julia was watching Elias, who stood by the window, a strange expression on his face. She approached him cautiously. "What is it?" "You amaze me," he said quietly. "The way you've grown, the strength you've found. He swallowed hard. "I wish I'd been brave enough to stay and see it happen." Before she could respond, a commotion at the counter drew their attention. A teenage girl was showing Nadine something on her phone. "Jules," Nadine called. "You need to see this." The bakery had gone viral. Photos of their displays, videos of customers sharing stories, posts about the family legacy, all spreading across social media like wildfire. Saved by Love was trending locally, with people sharing their own memories of neighborhood businesses that meant something more than profit. "See?" Elias said, his voice warm. "Some things are worth more than fancy packaging." Julia looked around her bakery, at the happy customers, the warmth of community, the legacy alive in every bite. Then she looked at Elias, who'd helped make it all possible. "Some things are," she agreed softly. Their eyes met, and the air crackled again with that dangerous electricity. Professional boundaries suddenly seemed very far away. The moment was broken by Nadine deliberately dropping a tray of cookies between them. "Less gazing, more glazing," she announced. "We've got hungry people waiting." They jumped apart, laughing. But as they returned to work, Julia caught Elias watching her with an expression that made her wonder if some boundaries were meant to be broken. Because maybe, just maybe, saving the bakery wasn't the only kind of redemption story being written in this kitchen. Maybe some recipes needed time to prove, some dough needed space to rise, and some loves needed years to mature into something strong enough to last. She picked up her grandmother's rolling pin, its wood smooth from generations of use, and smiled. After all, the best things in life, like the best breads, couldn't be rushed. They needed time, patience, and just a touch of magic to become something wonderful. The text came at 2 a.m., jolting Julia from a fitful sleep. "Mom's missing. She got out somehow. I can't find her." Julia was dressed and calling an Uber before she finished reading the message. Her fingers shook as she typed, "Where are you, Boston? Driving back now. The facility's searching. Police involved. Jules, I can't. I'll start looking here. She might remember places from before. Send me a recent photo." Her phone buzzed with an image. An elegant woman with Elias's grey-green eyes, silver-streaked hair pulled back neatly, smiling at someone off camera. Margaret Monroe looked nothing like the confused woman Julia remembered from 11 years ago. The Uber dropped her at Washington Square Park, where she'd started so many searches in the past. The city was different at this hour, all shadows and silence, broken only by the occasional late-night reveler or early-morning worker. "Think," she muttered to herself. Where would she go? Her phone rang. "Nadine, I got your text. I'm checking the hospitals." Julia's throat tightened with gratitude. "Thanks. I'm starting with places she might remember." "Jules." Nadine's voice was gentle. "Are you sure about this? Getting involved? I can't not help, Nadine." "I know, just be careful with your heart, okay?" Julia ended the call, remembering the panic in Elias's text. He'd been doing so well. Therapy, regular visits to Boston, carefully rebuilding his life. This would devastate him. She walked quickly, checking cafes just opening for the morning rush, asking early joggers if they'd seen anyone matching Margaret's description. The sky was beginning to lighten when her phone buzzed again. Almost there, nothing from the police yet. "Thank you for looking." Julia rubbed her tired eyes, thinking, what had Elias said about his mother recently? That she was baking again, that she remembered. The bakery. She ran the 6 blocks, heart pounding. The streets were still dark, but as she rounded the corner, she saw a figure sitting on the bakery's front step. Margaret Munro looked up as Julia approached, her expression serene. "I knew you'd come. You always liked the early shifts." "Mrs. Munro." Julia kept her voice calm, pulling out her phone to text Elias. "Everyone's very worried about you. Margaret, please. And I'm fine. She gestured at the bakery's window. "I needed to see where my boy found his heart again." Julia sat carefully beside her on the step. "You came all the way from Boston. Took the late train. Used my credit card. They'll have tracked it by now." Margaret smiled slightly. "I'm not having an episode, dear. I know exactly what I'm doing." Before Julia could respond, tires screeched at the corner. Elias's car pulled up haphazardly, and he practically fell out of the driver's seat. "Mom!" His voice cracked as he ran to them. "My God, Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." Margaret reached up to touch his face. "Just needed to see something for myself." "You can't. You shouldn't." He was shaking, Julia realized. The careful control he'd maintained these past weeks had shattered. "Elias," his mother's voice was firm, "look at me. I'm taking my medication. I'm clear-headed, and I needed to understand." "Understand what?" Margaret's eyes moved to Julia. "Why you came back here? Why this place kept calling you?" She smiled. "I remember her, you know. How happy you were. How lost you were after." "Mom, please." "No, let me finish." She took his hand, and Julia noticed her fingers trembling slightly, despite her calm demeanor. "I've been your excuse for too long. My illness, your fear of it. You've been hiding behind them." Elias sank down onto the step beside her, and Julia's heart ached at the lost look on his face. She started to stand, to give them privacy, but Margaret caught her hand. "Stay," she said softly. "This concerns you too." The sky was turning pearl grey now, the city stirring to life around them. Julia sat back down, acutely aware of Elias on the other side of his mother, his breathing still uneven. "When you disappeared," Margaret continued, "I blamed myself, thought my illness had broken something in you. But watching you these past months, seeing you come alive again," she squeezed Julia's hand, "it wasn't about me at all, was it? You were just scared of love itself." "Mom, I'm moving to New York." The words hung in the morning air. Julia felt Elias go very still. "What?" he whispered. "The facility has a sister location in Manhattan. I've already arranged the transfer." Margaret's voice was calm but firm. "You need to stop using me as a reason not to live your life, sweetheart. I'm better now, not perfect, but better, and I want to see you happy again." Elias made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You can't just... we need to discuss..." "Already discussed it with my doctors. They agree it's a good step." She turned to Julia. "I hear you're teaching baking classes now. Any room for one more student?" Julia's eyes filled with tears as she remembered the recent addition to the bakery's offerings. Small classes teaching family recipes, another of Elias's ideas to build community. "Always," she managed. The sound of running footsteps made them all look up. Nadine was sprinting toward them, her purple braids flying. "I've been calling everywhere and..." "Oh!" She stopped short, taking in the scene. "Well, this is cozy." Margaret laughed, a warm, rich sound that reminded Julia startlingly of Elias. "You must be Nadine. My son mentions you often in his calls. All good things, I hope." Nadine raised an eyebrow at Elias, who actually blushed, mostly about how you keep him in line. Margaret stood, smoothing her clothes with dignity. "Now, I believe I've caused enough excitement for one morning. Elias, dear, you look terrible. When was the last time you slept?" He stumbled to his feet. "Mum, we need to talk about this. The facility, the doctors. We'll all be calling shortly to confirm everything I've said." She patted his cheek. "But first, I believe I smell cinnamon rolls baking," Julia started. "The ovens. I turned them on when I got here. Force of habit. Muscle memory," Margaret said approvingly. "The sign of a true baker." She turned to her son. "Stop looking so frightened, sweetheart. Change isn't always a disaster." As if to punctuate her words, the bakery's timer chimed. Julia hurried inside to rescue the rolls, her mind spinning. When she returned, Nadine was helping Margaret arrange chairs at one of the outdoor tables, while Elias looked on, still shell-shocked. "Join us," Margaret called. "These smell divine." And so Julia found herself serving cinnamon rolls at dawn to her ex-boyfriend's runaway mother, while Nadine told increasingly dramatic stories about the bakery's revival, and Elias gradually stopped looking like he might shatter. As the sun rose fully, painting the street in gold, Julia watched Margaret laugh at one of Nadine's jokes and saw Elias slowly relax, the fear leaving his eyes. She thought about second chances and courage, about the different ways love could heal and hurt. "You're staring," Nadine whispered, nudging her. "Just thinking." "About?" Julia watched Elias explain something to his mother, his hands moving expressively, that familiar passion returning to his voice. "Say about how sometimes the scariest changes turn out to be exactly what we need." Margaret caught her eye and smiled, a knowing, gentle smile that held neither judgment nor pressure, just understanding. And Julia realized that maybe love wasn't about waiting for perfect moments or perfect people. Maybe it was about being brave enough to try again, even when life was messy and complicated and terrifying. Maybe it was about choosing to stay, even when running would be easier. As if reading her thoughts, Elias looked up. Their eyes met across the table, and in that moment, all their careful boundaries felt as insubstantial as morning mist burning away in the sun. "A little more vanilla," Julia suggested, watching Margaret carefully measure the extract. "These cookies are all about finding the right balance." The bakery's kitchen was warm with afternoon sunlight and the scent of baking. It had been 2 weeks since Margaret's midnight journey to New York, and she'd thrown herself into the bakery's rhythm with surprising grace. Now she stood at the prep station, focused intently on recreating her signature cinnamon sugar cookies for Julia's evening baking class. "You know," Margaret said, adding the vanilla with a steady hand, "I used to bake these every Sunday. Elias would sit right where you are, stealing dough when he thought I wasn't looking." Julia smiled, imagining a young Elias perched on a kitchen stool, sneaking tastes. "He still does that. I caught him yesterday with the chocolate chip cookie dough." "Some things never change," Margaret's eyes twinkled, "like the way he looks at you." Julia felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd been trying very hard not to think about that, about the growing tension between them, the way every accidental touch felt electric, the moments when their eyes would meet and the whole world seemed to hold its breath. "Margaret, I know. The older woman held up flour-dusted hands in surrender. "Not my business, but since I'm partly responsible for what happened before." "You weren't responsible." Julia's voice was firm. "Elias made his choices. Yes, but fear of my illness shaped those choices." Margaret began rolling the dough into perfect spheres. "He watched his father try to fix me for years, saw how it destroyed our marriage. He was terrified of putting someone else through that." Before Julia could respond, the kitchen door swung open. Elias walked in, carrying boxes of new baking supplies. He stopped short at the sight of them, and Julia wondered if he'd heard any of their conversation. "Hey," he said softly, his eyes finding hers like they always did now. "Need help with those cookies?" "Your mother's got it covered." Julia gestured to the perfectly formed rows of dough balls. "She's teaching tonight's class." His eyebrows rose. "You are?" Margaret shrugged elegantly. "Julia thinks it might help. Having someone who understands both baking and mental health challenges show people that creativity and healing can go hand in hand." Elias set down the boxes, emotion flickering across his face. "Mom, don't get sentimental on me, sweetheart." But Margaret's smile was gentle. "Now make yourself useful and help me dust these with cinnamon sugar." They worked together in comfortable silence, and Julia felt something warm unfurl in her chest watching them. Margaret had settled into her new facility smoothly, her doctors praising her progress. But these moments in the bakery seemed to help most of all: the routine, the creativity, the simple joy of creating something beautiful. The kitchen door swung open again, admitting Nadine in a whirlwind of purple braids and enthusiasm. "Emergency! We need more of those lemon-lavender scones, Stat. There's a line around the block." "Again?" Julia moved to the refrigerator where extra dough was chilling. "That food blogger's review really did a number on us." "Can't imagine who might have tipped her off about our historical recipes," Nadine said innocently, though her glance at Elias was anything but subtle. He held up his hands. "Hey, I just mentioned to a friend that she might enjoy our unique approach to traditional baking. The rest was all Julia's talent." "Smooth," Nadine muttered, loud enough for only Julia to hear. "Real smooth." Julia ignored her friend's knowing look and focused on preparing the scones. But she was acutely aware of Elias moving around the kitchen, his presence like a warm current she couldn't help but be drawn to. The afternoon passed in a blur of baking and customers. Before Julia knew it, evening had fallen, and the bakery was closing up. Margaret's class had been a success, her calm presence and honest sharing touching something deep in the participants. "That was wonderful," Julia said, helping Margaret pack up the leftover cookies. "Would you consider making it a regular thing?" "I'd like that." Margaret's smile held a hint of mischief, "though you might need to convince my son to stop hovering quite so much." "I don't hover," Elias protested, from where he was very obviously lingering by the door. "Darling, you've checked on me 4 times in the past hour." Margaret patted his cheek as she passed. "I'm taking a car back to the facility. You two can finish closing up." Before either of them could protest, she was gone, leaving them alone in the fragrant kitchen. Julia busied herself with wiping down counters, very aware of Elias still standing by the door. "She seems happy," he said finally. "She does." Julia turned to face him. "You don't have to worry so much, you know. She's stronger than you think." "I know." He moved closer, running a hand through his hair. I spent so long being terrified of turning into my father, of watching someone I love suffer because of my family's genetics." "Elias, let me finish." His voice was rough with emotion. "I was so focused on protecting you from what might happen that I didn't see I was hurting you in the present. And then today, watching Mom teach that class, seeing how she's turned her experience into something beautiful." He took a shaky breath. "I've been such a fool, Jules." She stood very still, her heart hammering. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done being afraid." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "I'm saying that losing you once was the biggest mistake of my life, and I'm not going to let fear make me lose you again." "Elias," her voice came out as a whisper, "we can't just pretend the past didn't happen." "No." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. "But we can learn from it, build something new, something stronger." She leaned into his touch despite herself. "Thais, what if it doesn't work? What if it does?" His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I love you, Julia Renee Carter. I loved you then, I love you now, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to love you for the rest of my life, if you'll let me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Julia looked up at him, at the man who'd broken her heart and helped heal it, who'd run away and come back, who'd faced his fears and grown into someone stronger. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "Me too." His smile was gentle. "But I'm more scared of not trying, of letting fear win again." She reached up, touching the scar along his jaw. "If we do this, no more running, no more making decisions for each other. We face things together." "Together," he agreed, his voice rough. This time, when he leaned down to kiss her, there were no phone calls to interrupt them, no professional boundaries to maintain, just the warmth of the kitchen, the lingering scent of cinnamon and vanilla, and the feeling of finally coming home. The kiss was both familiar and new, like trying a favorite recipe with a different spice, discovering how the old and new could blend into something wonderful. His hands tangled in her curls, and she gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Julia couldn't help laughing. "So your mother's going to be insufferable about this. Nadine's going to be worse." But his smile was radiant as he rested his forehead against hers. "Worth it, though." Outside, New York hummed with its eternal energy. Inside, in this kitchen that had seen so much love and loss and redemption, Julia felt something settle into place. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a fairy tale, but something better, a real love story, with all its complications and imperfections and possibilities. "Worth it," she agreed, and pulled him down for another kiss. 6 months later, Julia stood in her grandmother's kitchen, now her kitchen, and watched the morning light paint the walls gold. The bakery hummed with early activity, ovens warming, dough rising, coffee brewing, but this morning felt different, special. "Kat, you're doing it again," Nadine said, adjusting her camera setup. "That thing where you get all misty-eyed and sentimental." "It's a sentimental day." Julia smoothed her apron, not her usual work apron, but her grandmother's special one, preserved all these years. The delicate embroidery along the edges told the story of 4 generations of bakers, each adding their own stitches to the legacy. "Speaking of sentimental," Nadine nodded toward the door, where Margaret had just entered, carrying a familiar recipe box. "Is that my family's recipes?" Margaret set the box beside Julia's grandmother's. "I thought, well, if we're combining families today, we should combine traditions too." Julia hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla and lavender that Margaret had adopted as her signature. In the months since moving to New York, she'd become more than just Elias's mother or a bakery helper. She was family. "Perfect timing," Nadine called out. "We're about to start filming." This had been Elias's idea, documenting the bakery's history, not just through photos and recipes, but through the stories of the people who made it special. Today's video was particularly meaningful, the first joint baking session combining both family traditions. "Ready?" Nadine asked, adjusting the final lights. Julia looked around the kitchen, at Margaret arranging ingredients with careful precision, at the sunlight catching the 2 recipe boxes like a promise, at the empty space beside her that would soon be filled. "Almost," she said, "just waiting for—" The door chimed, and Elias walked in, carrying a stack of papers and wearing a smile that still made her heart skip. He crossed to her immediately, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Sorry I'm late." The lawyers had last-minute changes to the partnership agreement. Julia touched the papers in his hands, the document that would make him officially co-owner of the bakery, not because she needed help running it anymore, but because they decided to build something together, combining their strengths just as they were combining their lives. "All good changes?" she asked. "All good." His smile turned mischievous, though they were a bit confused by our insistence on including your grandmother's secret cookie recipe as a protected asset. "Some things are sacred," Margaret said solemnly, then winked. "All right, lovebirds." Nadine raised the camera. "Places, please. Let's make some history." They positioned themselves at the prep station, Julia and Elias in the center, Margaret beside them, the 2 recipe boxes open like books of memories. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching on the vintage photos they'd hung, on the new sign they'd added, "Carter and Monroe Family Bakery, Est, 1937. "Today," Julia began, looking into the camera, "we're sharing something special. 2 family traditions, 2 sets of recipes, coming together to create something new. While honoring everything that came before," Elias added, his hand finding hers beneath the counter. They worked together seamlessly, each movement a dance they'd perfected over months of morning baking sessions. Julia shared her grandmother's technique for folding pastry dough, while Margaret demonstrated her family's secret cinnamon swirl. Elias, who'd become surprisingly skilled, combined both methods to create something uniquely theirs. Between takes, Julia caught glimpses of their shared future in small moments. The way Margaret taught Elias her grandmother's embroidery stitch for the aprons, how he'd absent-mindedly touch his compass necklace while thinking, the sound of their laughter mixing with the bakery's familiar sounds. "And now," Margaret announced to the camera, "the most important part of any family recipe, sharing it with those you love." Right on cue, their regular customers began filtering in, drawn by the scent of fresh baking and the promise of something special. Mrs. Peterson claimed her usual spot, her great-grandchild in tow. The local food bloggers who'd helped spread their story set up their equipment. Even Lauren from Sweet Society stopped by, now a regular customer who'd learned that competition could coexist with community. "Should we tell them?" Elias whispered, as they watched their bakery family grow larger by the minute. Julia touched the small envelope in her apron pocket, the one containing the ultrasound photo they'd received yesterday. Their own little miracle, due in 7 months. "Soon," she whispered back. "Let's give them today's news first." He squeezed her hand, understanding. They'd learned to take things at their own pace, to let each chapter of their story unfold naturally. "Jules?" Nadine called out. "Ready for the big reveal?" Julia nodded, and Elias helped her lift the cloth covering their creation, a 3-tiered cake that told their story in sugar and flour. The bottom layer featured her grandmother's classic recipes, the middle layer showcased Margaret's family traditions, and the top was something entirely new, their first truly joint creation, representing not just their combined skills, but their shared future. "It's beautiful," Margaret breathed, and Julia saw tears in her eyes. As their guests gathered around, exclaiming over the cake and sharing their own stories, Julia felt the rightness of this moment settle into her bones. This was what she'd been baking all along, not just bread and pastries, but community, family, love. "Penny for your thoughts," Elias murmured, his arms sliding around her waist. She leaned back against him, watching Nadine show Margaret how to get the best angle for her food photos, seeing Mrs. Peterson share a cookie with her great-grandchild, feeling the tiny secret of their growing family safe between them. "I'm thinking about recipes," she said softly. "How the best ones aren't just about ingredients and methods, they're about timing, patience, knowing when to hold on and when to let go. And love," he added, his hand finding hers. "Don't forget, love. Never again," she promised, turning to face him. In his eyes, she saw everything, their past, their present, their future rising like perfectly proofed dough. The morning sun streamed through the windows, turning the bakery's worn wooden floors to gold. The ovens hummed their eternal song of creation and comfort. And in this kitchen that had seen 4 generations of love stories, Julia Carter finally understood. Sometimes the sweetest recipes were the ones that took the longest to get right. "Ready?" Elias asked. Though they both knew he meant more than just the day ahead, Julia smiled, thinking of all the mornings to come, all the recipes yet to create, all the love still rising. "Ready," she said, and meant forever. 2 years later. "Mama, look!" Julia turned from the oven to find her 18-month-old daughter, Rose, sitting on the bakery's counter, her tiny hands covered in flour. Elias stood behind her, supporting her while she attempted to roll a tiny ball of dough. "She's a natural," Margaret said from her usual spot at the prep station, where she was teaching her weekly baking therapy class, just like her mother. Rose beamed, her amber-brown eyes, so like Julia's own, sparkling with pride. Her dark curls were dusted with flour, and a smudge of cinnamon decorated her brown cheeks. "Just wait until she starts walking properly," Nadine called from where she was arranging her latest photography exhibition on the bakery walls, a chronicle of their journey titled "Rising Together." "This place will never be the same." "Too late for that," Elias laughed, scooping up their daughter before she could grab another handful of flour. "She's already redecorated my office 3 times this week." Julia watched them together, her heart full. The past 2 years had brought more joy than she'd ever imagined possible. The bakery had flourished, becoming not just a neighborhood fixture, but a symbol of community and healing. Margaret's baking therapy classes had gained national attention, inspiring other businesses to explore the connection between creativity and mental health, and their family. Julia touched her stomach gently, where their second miracle was just beginning to make their presence known. They hadn't told anyone yet, but she'd caught Margaret eyeing her knowingly during morning prep sessions. Incoming, Nadine's warning drew their attention to the door, where Mrs. Peterson was entering with her now 3-year-old great-granddaughter. The little girl made a beeline for Rose, their regular morning playdate right on schedule. As the children babbled together, Julia felt Elias's arms slip around her waist. "Happy," he murmured. She leaned back against him, taking in their bustling bakery. The walls now held 3 generations of photos, her grandmother's time, their revival story, and the new memories they created daily. The old recipe boxes sat proudly displayed in a custom case, joined by a third that they were filling with their own creations. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching on the sign they'd updated last month, Carter Monroe Family Bakery, where love rises since 1937. "More than happy," she answered, turning to kiss him softly. "Complete." Rose's delighted giggle drew them back to the present as she successfully rolled her first dough ball, supervised by a beaming Margaret. "Another baker in the family," Margaret declared proudly. Julia watched her daughter, surrounded by all the love and support she could ever need, and thought about the journey that had brought them here, about second chances and courage, about the different ways love could heal and grow. "You know what this means?" Elias whispered, nodding at their flour-covered daughter. "We're going to need a bigger kitchen." Julia smiled, thinking of the plans they'd been discussing, expanding the bakery into the next-door space, adding a dedicated area for Margaret's classes, creating a proper play corner for the growing number of children who filled their mornings with laughter. "Good thing we know something about building things together," she said. Above them, the bakery's ancient ceiling fans spun lazily, stirring the perpetual scent of vanilla and possibilities. Outside, New York rushed past in its eternal rhythm. But here, in this space made sacred by love and memory and morning light, time moved at its own sweet pace. Rose had fallen asleep on Margaret's lap, dusting her grandmother's elegant black dress with flour and contentment. Nadine was teaching Mrs. Peterson's great-granddaughter how to use a professional camera, while their regular customers drifted in and out, each adding their own warmth to the morning. Julia touched her compass necklace, matched by the one Elias still wore, and the tiny one they'd had made for Rose. Not just jewelry anymore, but a symbol of all the ways love could guide you home. "Ready for another day?" Elias asked, his hand finding hers. Julia smiled, thinking of all the chapters yet to come, The new baby, the expansion, the endless possibilities rising like dough in the warmth of their shared love. With you, she squeezed his hand, always. Because some things, like the best recipes, only got better with time, and their love story, written in sugar and flour and second chances, was still rising, still growing, still creating something wonderful, just like it always would. The end. If you had to choose between giving up on love for fear of getting hurt, or risking everything for a second chance, like Julia and Elias, what would your decision be? Do you believe that true love deserves another chance, even after a deep disappointment? And if you were Julia, would you forgive Elias after 11 years of silence? Reflect on how fear can prevent us from living great love stories, and how the courage to try again, even with scars from the past, can lead us to find the happiness we've always dreamed of. She went to hide in tears in a bathroom and ended up locked up with her millionaire boss. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't have answered that call, but she did anyway. Daria Celeste Rivers sat hunched over in the employee restroom of Thorne Pharmaceuticals, her dark brown eyes glistening with unshed tears as her phone buzzed relentlessly against the cold tile floor. The notification glowed mockingly. Rent overdue, $847. Her younger sister's voicemail played on repeat in her mind. Dari, you're always too busy, acting like you're better than all of us now. At 29, Daria had thought she'd have it figured out by now. Her grandmother's gumbo recipe, the sound of jazz drifting from French Quarter windows, the weight of expectations. Everything felt heavy tonight in New Orleans. Humid embrace. She pressed her back against the bathroom stall, her curvy 5'5" frame trembling as she tried to muffle the sob building in her chest. Her fingers found her silver hoops, twisting them nervously, a habit she'd developed in college when money got tight and dreams felt impossible. The bathroom door echoed with approaching footsteps, and Daria quickly wiped her face, hoping whoever it was would just leave, but fate had other plans. The door clicked shut with finality, followed by an unmistakable sound, the lock mechanism jamming. Daria's heart sank as she realized she wasn't alone. Through the gap under the stall door, she could see expensive Italian leather shoes. "Great," came a deep, measured voice. "Just perfect." Daria recognized that voice instantly. Theodore Ashton Kingsley, Theo to those brave enough to use his nickname, her boss, the CEO, the man whose presence commanded every room he entered. She held her breath, praying he hadn't noticed her. "I know someone's in there," Theo said, his tone softer now. The stall doors closed. Defeated, Daria emerged slowly, her tear-stained face meeting the concerned gaze of the most intimidating man in the building. At 6'1", with broad shoulders that filled his navy-tailored suit perfectly, Theo possessed the kind of quiet intensity that made people stop mid-sentence. His dark hair was styled with precision, and his honey-brown eyes held depths she'd never noticed from across conference rooms. "Miss Rivers," he said, and she caught something unexpected in his voice, genuine concern. "Are you all right?" "Just peachy," Daria mumbled, attempting to move past him to the door. She turned the handle. Nothing, pushed harder, still nothing. Theo tried the door himself, his jaw tightening as he realized their predicament. The maintenance crew mentioned this lock's been problematic. They stood in awkward silence, the sound of a dripping faucet filling the space between them. Daria's phone buzzed again, another bill notification, and she quickly silenced it. "I don't usually—" Theo began, then stopped. He loosened his tie slightly, a gesture so human it surprised her. "I don't usually hide in bathrooms either." Despite everything, Daria almost smiled. "Bad day, you could say that." Theo leaned against the sink, and for the first time since she'd started working here 2 years ago, he looked approachable, vulnerable even. Sometimes the weight of everyone's expectations gets— He gestured vaguely. "Heavy," Daria finished, understanding completely. Their eyes met in the mirror's reflection, and something shifted. Here they were, the boss and the receptionist, the millionaire and the woman counting coins for bus fare, equally trapped, equally human. "I take medication," Theo said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper, "for depression. Started after my brother." He stopped, adjusting his watch, a nervous gesture Daria had never noticed before. The confession hung in the air like incense, sacred and surprising. Daria found herself stepping closer, her own walls beginning to crumble. I have Pinterest boards full of beaches I'll probably never see, she whispered back, and I listen to H-E-R on repeat when the world feels too big. Theo's lips curved into the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. I listened to Miles Davis. Same reason. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway, but neither of them called for help. Not yet. In this sterile bathroom, under fluorescent lights that should have been unflattering but somehow made everything feel honest, they had found something neither expected. Do you ever feel like you're drowning? Daria asked, her voice so soft it barely carried. Every day, Theo replied, and the weight of his admission settled between them like a bridge. The building's HVAC system hummed to life, filling the silence as they stood there. Two souls who had somehow found each other in the last place either would have looked. And in that moment, Daria realized that sometimes the most unexpected connections happen when you stop trying to be perfect. The maintenance crew found them an hour later, but something had already changed. Daria couldn't stop thinking about the way Theo's voice had cracked when he mentioned his brother, or how his perfectly composed exterior had melted away like sugar in rain. She spent the next morning at her reception desk, stealing glances toward his corner office, remembering the vulnerability in his honey-brown eyes. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister Brielle. Still too good to call your family back? Daria's fingers found her silver hoops again, twisting them as she typed and deleted 3 different responses. At 22, Brielle had their grandmother's fire and none of Daria's patience for diplomacy. Her sister's Instagram stories flashed across her mind. Late nights, new friends, the kind of freedom Daria had traded for responsibility years ago. Good morning, Ms. Rivers? Theo's voice made her look up sharply. He stood at her desk in another impeccable suit, but she could see the tiny details now, the way he pressed his lips together when thinking, how his left hand absently adjusted his watch when he was uncertain. Mr. Kingsley, she replied, professional mask sliding into place. I wanted to thank you, he said quietly, for last night, and to apologize if I made you uncomfortable with my candidness. Daria studied his face, seeing the CEO trying to rebuild walls that had already fallen. You didn't make me uncomfortable. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the busy lobby faded away. Theo's expression softened, and she caught a glimpse of the man from the bathroom, raw, real, beautifully imperfect. Coffee? He asked suddenly. I mean, would you like to get coffee? Not as... He gestured between his suit and her desk, just as two people who got locked in a bathroom together. Daria's heart did something complicated in her chest. Yes, but I can't leave the desk until... Lunch break, Theo said quickly. Café Luna, on Magazine Street, if you want. After he walked away, Daria sat stunned. Theo Kingsley had just asked her to coffee. Not the CEO asking his employee, the man asking the woman who'd seen him cry. The morning crawled by. Daria fielded calls and scheduled appointments while checking her bank balance obsessively. Coffee meant spending money she didn't have, but the alternative, sitting in the break room eating a peanut butter sandwich while wondering, what if, felt worse. At noon, she found Theo at a corner table in Café Luna, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He'd loosened his tie and rolled his sleeves, making him seem younger, more approachable. When he saw her, relief flooded his features. You came, he said, standing to pull out her chair. You doubted I would? I doubted my sanity for asking. His smile was self-deprecating. I don't exactly have experience with, he gestured vaguely. Normal human interaction? Daria teased, settling into her seat. Something like that. Theo signaled the waitress. What would you like? Daria scanned the menu, calculating. The cheapest option was still $8, money she needed for the bus tomorrow. Just coffee, black. Are you sure? Their jambalaya's supposed to be incredible. Coffee's perfect, she insisted, hating how her financial reality intruded on this moment. Theo studied her face, and she saw the exact moment he understood. Instead of pushing, he ordered coffee for both of them and asked the waitress to surprise them with whatever she recommended. I can't, Daria started. It's my suggestion, Theo said gently. My treat. They sat in awkward silence until their drinks arrived, followed by beignets neither had ordered, but both were grateful for. Daria bit into the powdered sugar heaven and couldn't suppress a small moan of appreciation. Good? Theo asked, and there was something almost tender in his voice. Amazing, I haven't had beignets since... She paused, remembering. Since I was a kid, my grandmother used to take me and Brielle to Café du Monde every Sunday after church. Tell me about her, your grandmother, And suddenly Daria was talking about Sunday gumbo dinners, about learning to braid hair on the front porch, about the woman who taught her that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but how you carried yourself. Theo listened with an intensity that made her feel heard, really heard, for the first time in years. "What about your family?" she asked eventually. Theo's expression clouded. "My parents have been married 42 years. They're formidable. Old New Orleans money, expectations that could crush diamonds." He paused, adjusting his watch. "My brother Marcus was the golden child, charming, effortless, everything I'm not. Was. Car accident. 3 years ago." Theo's voice was steady, but his knuckles were white around his coffee cup. "I've been trying to fill his shoes ever since, but they never quite fit." Daria reached across the table instinctively, covering his hand with hers. "Maybe you're not supposed to fill them. Maybe you're supposed to walk your own path." Theo looked down at their joined hands, and something shifted in his expression. "When did you become so wise?" "Poverty's a hell of a teacher." They talked until the afternoon shift change, sharing stories and silences with equal comfort. When Theo walked her back to the office, Daria felt lighter than she had in months, until she saw her phone. 3 missed calls from Brielle, 1 voicemail. "Dari, I'm at the emergency room. Don't freak out, but I need you." The coffee warmth evaporated instantly. Daria's hands shook as she called back, Theo watching with concern as her face went pale. "Brielle, what happened? Are you okay?" I'm fine, came her sister's voice, a weak but defiant. "Just, can you come? Please." Daria hung up, already calculating bus routes and praying her sister hadn't done something irreversibly stupid. "What's wrong?" Theo asked. "My sister's in the hospital. I have to go." "I'll drive you." "You don't have to." "Daria." The sound of her first name in his voice stopped her cold. "Let me help." And as they rushed toward his car, a sleek sedan that probably cost more than she made in 2 years, Daria realized that letting people help wasn't always about weakness. Sometimes it was about trust. Sorisiva Calfium, the emergency room smelled like disinfectant and desperation, familiar scents that reminded Daria of too many childhood visits. She found Brielle in bed 7, looking smaller than her 22 years, her usually vibrant braids hanging limp around her shoulders, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her left wrist was wrapped in a splint. "Don't say it," Brielle said, before Daria could speak. "Say what?" "That I'm irresponsible. That I should have called sooner. That you're disappointed." Brielle's voice cracked on the last word. Daria sank into the plastic chair beside the bed, exhaustion hitting her like a wave. "What happened, Brie?" "Stupid bike accident. Trying to impress some guy." Brielle's laugh was bitter. "Broke my wrist, bruised my ribs, and my pride's somewhere in the gutter on Bourbon Street." "Are you—" "The doctors want to keep me overnight for observation." "Something about potential concussion." Brielle finally looked at her sister. "I know you don't have the money for this. The insurance barely covers anything, and I lost my job last week." Daria's heart sank. Another bill she couldn't afford, another crisis to navigate. She twisted her silver hoops, mind racing through impossible calculations. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Theo stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined, holding 2 cups of coffee and a bag from the hospital cafeteria. "I thought you might need—" He trailed off, taking in Brielle's suspicious stare. "Who's this?" Brielle asked, her voice sharp with protective instinct. "This is Theo," Daria said carefully. "My boss." "Your boss brought you coffee at the hospital?" Brielle's eyebrows shot up. "Damn, Daria, what kind of job you got?" "Brielle," Daria warned, embarrassment heating her cheeks. Theo stepped forward, extending his hand. "Theodore Kingsley, and you must be the sister who keeps Daria on her toes." Despite herself, Brielle smiled. "Brielle Rivers. And yeah, somebody's got to keep her from being too perfect all the time." "I can see the family resemblance," Theo said, settling into another chair. "Same stubborn chin." "Hey!" Both sisters protested simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. The first genuine moment they'd shared in months. The next few hours passed in a strange bubble. Theo proved surprisingly good at hospital small talk, making Brielle laugh with stories about his own emergency room visits, a childhood broken arm from trying to climb the family's oak tree, stitches from a teenage surfing accident in California. "Can you surf?" Brielle asked, clearly intrigued. "Used to, haven't been on a board in years." Theo's expression grew wistful. "My brother and I used to drive out to the Gulf every weekend, convinced we were going to be professional surfers." "What stopped you?" "Life. Expectations. The family business. He shrugged. Sometimes you wake up one day and realize you're living someone else's dream. Daria watched this exchange with growing amazement. Theo was being normal, talking to her sister like they were old friends, making her laugh when she should have been in pain. When was the last time someone had shown up for her family like this? Around midnight, a doctor finally appeared with discharge papers. Brielle would be fine. Minor concussion, sprained wrist, bruised ego. But the bill made Daria's stomach drop. $847 for the emergency room visit, with insurance covering less than half. She stepped into the hallway to process this financial catastrophe. Phone calculator open, trying to figure out which essential bill she could skip to make room for this new crisis. "It's a lot," Theo said quietly, appearing beside her. "I'll figure it out," Daria said automatically. The response burned into her DNA by years of making do. "Let me..." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I appreciate everything you've done tonight. I really do. But I can't. I won't be someone's charity case." Theo was quiet for a long moment. "What if it wasn't charity? What do you mean?" "We need someone to coordinate the employee wellness program. It's legitimate work, 20 hours a week, flexible schedule, pays enough to..." He gestured toward the bill in her hands. Daria stared at him. "You're making up a job for me. I'm offering you an opportunity. There's a difference. Is there?" Before Theo could answer, Brielle appeared in the doorway, hospital gown replaced by her street clothes, ripped jeans, oversized sweatshirt, sneakers that had seen better days. "Ready to go?" she asked, then caught the tension between them. "Did I interrupt something?" "No," Daria said quickly. "We're done here." The ride home was quiet, Brielle dozing against the window while Daria stared out at the city lights. Theo didn't push, didn't try to convince her, just drove through the New Orleans night with jazz playing softly on the radio. When they reached Daria's apartment building, a converted shotgun house in a neighborhood gentrification hadn't quite reached, Theo helped Brielle up the narrow stairs while Daria fumbled with her keys. "Thank you," Daria said at the door, meaning it. "For everything tonight." "It's what friends do," Theo replied, and the word friends hung between them like a question neither was ready to answer. After he left, Daria helped Brielle settle on the couch, bringing her pain medication and an ice pack for her wrist. "He likes you," Brielle said out of nowhere. "He's my boss." "That's not what I said." Brielle studied her sister's face. "And you like him too. It's complicated. The best things usually are." Brielle adjusted the ice pack. "He seems different from what I expected." "Different how?" "I don't know. Real, I guess. Rich guys are usually all flash and no substance, but he sat in a hospital for 4 hours just because you needed him to." Daria thought about that as she finally fell into bed at 2 a.m. Theo hadn't tried to fix everything with money, though he'd offered. He'd simply shown up, stayed present, made her sister laugh when she needed it most. But accepting his help meant crossing a line she'd drawn years ago, the line between independence and dependence, between dignity and desperation, and she wasn't sure she was ready to find out what waited on the other side. The wellness program coordinator position was real. Daria discovered this Monday morning when HR called with official paperwork, benefit details, and a start date, 20 hours a week, flexible scheduling, and a salary that would cover Brielle's hospital bill with enough left over to buy groceries without counting every dollar. She stared at the offer letter, Theo's words echoing in her mind. "It's what friends do." Friends. The word felt dangerous, loaded with possibilities she wasn't sure she could afford, emotionally or otherwise. At lunch, she found herself at Café Luna again, this time alone with her thoughts and a coffee she could actually afford. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brielle. "Physical therapy sucked, but the therapist was cute. How's the mysterious job offer?" Before she could respond, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mind if I sit?" Theo stood beside her table, looking less polished than usual. His tie was loosened, hair slightly mussed, and there were shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "Bad morning?" Daria asked, as he settled across from her. "Board meeting. They're pushing for expansion into Southeast Asia, and he rubbed his temples. "I'm not sure I'm the right person to lead it." "Why not?" "Because every time I look at those projections, all I can think about is how Marcus would have handled it. He was the one who was good with people, who could walk into a room and make everyone believe in the impossible." Daria watched him adjust his watch, that nervous habit she was beginning to recognize, and felt something shift inside her chest. "Maybe that's your problem," she said quietly. What do you mean? You're trying to be Marcus instead of being Theo. She leaned forward. What would you do differently if you weren't worried about living up to someone else's legacy? Theo was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. I'd focus on the workers, the people in those factories, their families, their communities. Marcus always looked at the big picture, but He paused. I see the details, the individual faces behind the numbers. That sounds like exactly the right person to lead an expansion. When Theo looked up, his honey-brown eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. Yeah, you really think so? I think you're not giving yourself enough credit. They sat in comfortable silence, and Daria found herself studying his face, the strong jaw softened by uncertainty, the way his mouth curved when he was thinking, the laugh lines that suggested he hadn't always been this serious. About the job offer, she said finally. Theo's expression became carefully neutral. You don't have to. I want to accept it, but I need you to understand something. She twisted her silver hoops, gathering courage. I can't be your project, your good deed, your way of feeling better about having money when I don't. That's not. Let me finish. Daria's voice was steady but firm. If we're going to do this, work together, be friends, come whatever this is, it has to be real, equal, not you rescuing me and me being grateful. Theo nodded slowly. What would equal look like? Honest. No more job offers when I'm in crisis. No paying for things without asking. And if you're having a bad day, you tell me instead of pretending everything's perfect. Deal, Theo said immediately. But I have conditions too, such as, if you need help, real help, not just money, you ask for it. And you stop twisting your earrings every time you're stressed, because it makes me want to fix whatever's wrong. And apparently I'm not allowed to do that anymore. Despite herself, Daria smiled. You notice that? I notice everything about you, Theo said, then looked surprised by his own admission. The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to explore. Daria felt heat rise in her cheeks, and for a moment, the cafe faded away. I should get back, she said, standing abruptly. Daria, wait. Theo caught her hand as she passed his chair. I meant what I said, about noticing you, not just the earrings. She looked down at their joined hands, his pale and soft from a life of ease, hers darker and calloused from years of making do. The contrast should have emphasized their differences, but instead, it felt like they fit together. This is dangerous, she whispered. I know. We work together. You're my boss. I know that too. And I can't afford to lose my job over whatever this is. Theo's thumb brushed across her knuckles, gentle and sure. Then we'll be careful. Walking back to the office, Daria felt like she was balancing on a tightrope. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. Don't mix business with pleasure. Don't date your boss. Don't fall for someone whose monthly car payment was more than your yearly salary. But her heart was writing a different story, one where a man showed up at hospitals and noticed nervous habits and looked at her like she was worth noticing. That afternoon, she signed the wellness coordinator contract and moved her few belongings to a small office down the hall from Theo's. The space was modest but hers, a desk, a computer, a window overlooking the street. She was arranging her supplies when her phone rang. Brielle's contact photo filled the screen, a selfie from last Christmas, both sisters laughing at something Daria couldn't remember now. How's the new job? Brielle asked without preamble. Good, different, still figuring it out. And the boss? Daria glanced toward Theo's office, where she could see him through the glass walls, head bent over paperwork, completely absorbed. Still my boss, she said carefully. But nothing. It's just a job, Brie. Brielle's disbelief was audible. Well, just remember, the heart wants what it wants, but the brain's got to live with the consequences. After hanging up, Daria sat in her new office, watching Theo work. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and she could see the concentration in his posture, the way he occasionally ran his fingers through his hair when frustrated. Her phone buzzed with an email from him. Dinner tomorrow? To discuss wellness program strategies. Somewhere with jambalaya this time. She typed back, Is this business or personal? His response came immediately. Does it matter? And sitting there in her new office, watching the man who'd held her hand in a cafe that afternoon, Daria realized that maybe it didn't matter at all. Maybe what mattered was that for the first time in years, someone was asking her to dinner, not because they felt sorry for her, but because they wanted her company. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The restaurant Theo chose wasn't what Daria expected. Instead of the upscale establishments she'd imagined him frequenting, He led her to a small Creole place in the Bywater, where locals ate at mismatched tables, and the jambalaya came with cornbread that melted in your mouth, the kind of place she would have picked if she'd been the one choosing. "How did you know about this place?" she asked, settling into a wooden chair that had seen better decades. "Marcus brought me here once," Theo admitted, adjusting his watch, though she noticed he did it less frequently now. "Said the best food came from places that didn't need to impress anybody." Smart man, he was. Theo's smile was soft, tinged with sadness, but no longer sharp with pain. "Gerd, he would have liked you." "Yeah? He had a thing for people who called him out on his bullshit." Theo's grin turned mischievous. "You definitely would have called him out." Their conversation flowed easier than jambalaya off a spoon. Daria found herself laughing at Theo's stories about board meetings gone wrong, while he listened intently as she described her plans for the wellness program, mental health workshops, stress management seminars, resources for employees struggling with financial anxiety. "You really think people will come," Theo asked, "to talk about mental health at work? If you create a safe space, they will. Most people are drowning in silence, pretending everything's fine when it's not." She paused, remembering their bathroom conversation. "Sometimes all it takes is one person being honest first." Theo's honey-brown eyes held hers across the table. "Is that what we're doing, being honest?" The question carried weight beyond its words. Daria felt her pulse quicken, aware they were approaching something that couldn't be taken back. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Thais, what would honest look like?" "Honest would be me admitting that I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night we got locked up together, that I've been looking forward to this dinner all week, and not because I care about wellness program strategies." Daria's breath caught. "Theo, honest would be telling you that when you smile, really smile, not the polite one you use at work, it makes me forget about board meetings and profit margins and all the reasons I'm supposed to be miserable. We can't what? Can't admit there's something here." Theo leaned forward. "Because I'm your boss. Because I have money, and you don't. Because people will talk. All of those things." Daria twisted her silver hoops, then caught herself and stopped. "This is my career, Theo, my livelihood. I can't risk it for what? For something that might not be real." Theo was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "What would make it real for you?" The question surprised her. She'd expected him to argue, to minimize her concerns, to use his privilege to bulldoze past her hesitations. Instead, he was asking what she needed. "Time," she said finally, "and space to figure out who we are when we're not boss and employee, when there's no crisis throwing us together, no dramatic moments making everything feel more intense than it is." Okay. You want time and space? You've got it." Theo signaled for the check. "But I have one condition." "What's that?" "No pretending this conversation didn't happen. No going back to purely professional small talk and pretending you don't feel this too." Daria's heart hammered against her ribs. "I feel it." "Good." Theo's smile was soft, genuine. "Then we'll take this slow. Figure it out as we go." The drive back to her apartment was quiet but not uncomfortable. Theo's playlist had shifted from jazz to something softer, John Legend, H.E., to artists who understood the complexity of wanting something you weren't sure you could have. "Thank you," Daria said, as he walked her to her door. "For dinner, for understanding why this is complicated. Thank you for being honest about what you need." Theo paused at the bottom of her steps. "See you tomorrow?" "See you tomorrow." But as she watched him drive away, Daria realized tomorrow had become loaded with new possibilities. How do you work alongside someone who's just confessed to thinking about you constantly? How do you maintain professional boundaries when you've admitted to feeling something too? Inside her apartment, she found Brielle on the couch, binge-watching reality TV with her injured wrist propped on a pillow. "How was the business dinner?" Brielle asked without looking away from the screen. "Complicated. The good kind or the bad kind?" Daria sank onto the couch beside her sister. "Both." "Ah." Brielle muted the TV and turned to face her. "He told you he likes you. How did you—" "Please. The man looked at you like you hung the moon when we were at the hospital. What did you tell him? That we need to take it slow, figure out what this is without the pressure of working together." "Smart." Brielle nodded approvingly. "And scary as hell, right?" "Terrifying." "Good. The best things usually are." Brielle reached over and squeezed Daria's hand. "For what it's worth, I think he's good for you." "Why?" "Because you're smiling, like, really smiling. Haven't seen that in a while." That night, lying in bed, Daria replayed every moment of the evening. Theo's confession, the way his eyes had held hers, the gentle understanding in his voice when she'd asked for time. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Sweet dreams, Daria. Thank you for a perfect evening." She typed back, "Thank you for being patient with my complicated heart." His response came immediately. "Your heart isn't complicated. It's careful. There's a difference." And as she drifted off to sleep, Daria realized that maybe being careful wasn't the same as being afraid. Maybe it was just being smart enough to protect something that might turn out to be worth protecting. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, but for the first time in years, the thrill was winning. Working with Theo after their dinner conversation proved to be an exquisite form of torture. Daria became hyper-aware of everything. The way he said good morning with just a hint of warmth that wasn't quite professional, how his gaze lingered on her face during meetings, the careful distance he maintained when passing documents that ensured their fingers wouldn't accidentally brush. 2 weeks into their unspoken agreement to take things slow, the tension was becoming unbearable. "Sirs, you're driving yourself crazy," Brielle observed, watching Daria pace their small living room while venting about her day, and probably him too. "We agreed to keep things professional." "Professional doesn't mean pretending you're both robots." Brielle adjusted the pillow under her healing wrist. "When's the last time you two had an actual conversation about something other than work?" Daria couldn't answer because she knew Brielle was right. In their effort to maintain boundaries, she and Theo had created a sterile buffer zone that was sucking all the warmth out of their interactions. The next morning, she found Theo in his office early, staring out the window with his coffee growing cold. He looked tired, stressed, and utterly alone. "Bad night?" she asked from the doorway. He turned, and his expression shifted from surprise to something softer. "Couldn't sleep. You?" "Same." She stepped into his office, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk. About how we're both miserable trying to pretend we don't care about each other." Theo's smile was rueful. "Is it that obvious? Yesterday you called me Ms. Rivers in an email about wellness program snacks. We've moved past Ms. Rivers, Theo, have we?" The question hung between them, and Daria realized they were at a crossroads. They could keep pretending to be nothing more than colleagues, or they could figure out how to be honest about their feelings while maintaining their professional responsibilities. "I miss talking to you," she said quietly. "Really talking, like we did at dinner. I miss it too." Theo stood, moving closer but stopping just outside her personal space. "But I don't want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable at work." "What if we made rules?" Daria suggested. "Clear boundaries that let us be us, without compromising either of our careers." "What kind of rules?" "At work, we're professional, colleagues. But after hours," she paused, gathering courage, "after hours, we're just Daria and Theo, two people getting to know each other." Theo's eyes searched her face. "And if it doesn't work out, if we try this and it goes badly, then we handle it like adults." "But Theo," she stepped closer, close enough to catch his cologne, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his honey-brown eyes. "What if it does work out?" Before he could answer, a knock interrupted them. Theo's assistant appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. "Mr. Kingsley, the board members are here early for the 10 o'clock meeting." Reality crashed back in. Daria stepped away quickly, professional mask sliding into place. "I should go prepare the wellness presentation." "Daria," Theo called as she reached the door. "Tonight, coffee, just to talk." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and escaped to her office with her heart racing. The day crawled by. Daria threw herself into work, finalizing wellness program materials and scheduling employee information sessions. But every time she passed Theo's office, every time she heard his voice in the hallway, her pulse quickened. At 6 o'clock, she found him waiting by the elevator, jacket slung over his shoulder, looking younger without the formal business armor. "Ready for that coffee?" he asked. They ended up at a different cafe this time, one in the Garden District, where tourists and locals mingled over café au lait and conversations that stretched into the evening. Daria felt the artificial tension of the day dissolving as they talked, really talked, for the first time in weeks. "Tell me something I don't know about you," Theo said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "I wanted to be a teacher," Daria admitted. "Elementary school. I was 3 semesters away from my degree when my grandmother got sick and I had to drop out to take care of her. Do you regret it?" "No. Those last months with her were precious, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd finished." "You could still finish," Theo said quietly. "The program I'm proposing, it's essentially educational work. employee development, training seminars. If you wanted to go back to school, Theo, Daria's voice carried a warning. What? I'm not offering to pay for it. I'm just saying the company has tuition assistance programs for professional development. That's actually thoughtful. I can be thoughtful when I'm not overthinking everything. His smile was self-deprecating. Your turn. Ask me something. What scares you most? The question surprised him. She could see it in the way his expression shifted, became more guarded. Besides the obvious. Besides losing another person I care about. Daria nodded. Becoming my father, Theo said finally. Cold, calculating, measuring everything by profit margins. I see it happening sometimes, in board meetings, when I make decisions based on numbers instead of people. It terrifies me. Then don't become him. It's not that simple, isn't it? Daria leaned forward. Every day you choose who you want to be. Every decision is a chance to be different. They talked until the cafe started closing, staff stacking chairs and mopping floors around them. Walking to Theo's car, Daria felt lighter than she had in weeks. This was nice, she said, as he opened her door. It was. Theo paused before closing it. Same time tomorrow. Are we dating? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Theo considered this seriously. Are we? I don't know. What would dating look like for us? Honest conversations, shared meals, getting to know each other without the pressure of figuring out our entire future. He smiled, taking it slow, like you said. Okay, let's date. Carefully, thoughtfully. But let's see where this goes. Theo's smile could have powered half of New Orleans. I'd like that very much. The drive to her apartment was filled with comfortable silence and the kind of nervous energy that comes with new beginnings. When he walked her to her door, they both hesitated on the steps. So, Daria said, do we shake hands? Hug? What's the protocol for the end of a first official date? I was hoping, Theo said, stepping closer, that protocol could go to hell for just a minute. His hand cupped her cheek gently, thumb brushing across her skin as he leaned down. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. Daria answered by rising on her toes, her hands finding the lapels of his shirt. When they broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. That was, Daria began. Perfect, Theo finished. I was going to say dangerous. Same thing. Inside her apartment, Brielle took one look at Daria's face and grinned. Well, look who finally stopped overthinking long enough to let herself be happy. We're taking it slow, Daria protested, touching her lips where she could still feel the warmth of Theo's kiss. How slow we talking? Because that smile says you're already halfway gone. And lying in bed that night, replaying every moment of the evening, Daria realized Brielle might be right. She was falling for Theodore Ashton Kingsley, and for the first time in her life, the fall felt like flying. 3 weeks of careful dating turned Daria's world upside down in the most beautiful way. She discovered that Theo was funny, genuinely, surprisingly funny, with a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh until her sides hurt. That he was thoughtful in small ways, remembering she preferred her coffee with cream, that her sister was left-handed and might need ergonomic tools as her wrist healed, that Fridays were hard because that's when all the bills came due. She learned he had insomnia, often texting her at midnight with random thoughts or funny memes he'd found, that he'd kept every letter his brother had written from college, that he played piano, beautifully, sadly, when he thought no one was listening. You're glowing, her co-worker Marissa observed one Thursday morning. Like, literally glowing. What's your secret? Daria tried to deflect, but the truth was written all over her face. For the first time in years, she was happy, really, genuinely happy. Their relationship existed in careful compartments, professional colleagues during work hours, something deeper and more real in the evenings. Coffee dates became dinner dates, which became long walks through the French Quarter, talking about everything and nothing. But it was the quiet moments that undid her, the way Theo looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. How he listened, really listened, when she talked about her dreams, her fears, her complicated relationship with money and independence. I want to show you something, he said one Friday evening as they finished dinner at their usual spot in the Bywater. Instead of driving toward her apartment, Theo headed toward the warehouse district. He pulled up in front of a converted building, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. What is this? Daria asked as he led her inside. My place, Theo said, suddenly nervous. I've been wanting to invite you over, but I wasn't sure. The elevator opened onto a loft that took Daria's breath away. The space was enormous, but somehow cozy, filled with comfortable furniture, books everywhere, and art that looked like it had been chosen for love rather than status. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the Mississippi River. "Theo," she breathed, "this is beautiful." "It doesn't feel like home yet," he admitted, watching her explore. "Too big, too quiet. But I thought, maybe you'd help me make it feel less empty." The vulnerability in his voice made her turn around. He stood in the center of his beautiful, lonely space, hands in his pockets, looking like he was afraid she might bolt. "What are you asking?" she said softly. "I'm asking if you want to stay. Tonight. Not because I expect anything," he added quickly. "Just because I sleep better when you're around, and I thought maybe you might want to see what Saturday morning looks like from here." Daria's heart did something complicated in her chest. They'd been taking things slow, building trust and connection, but this felt like stepping across a threshold she couldn't uncross. "I don't have anything with me," she said. "I have an extra toothbrush, a drawer full of clean t-shirts." His smile was tentative. "Unless you're not ready, I understand if—" "Theo," he stopped talking, waiting. "Show me the view." They stood at the windows as the sun set over New Orleans, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that rivaled any Pinterest board. Theo's arm came around her shoulders, and Daria let herself lean into his warmth. "My grandmother would have loved this," she said quietly. "Tell me about her." So Daria talked about Sunday dinners and life lessons shared over gumbo, about a woman who raised 2 girls on a housekeeper's salary and somehow made them feel rich in all the ways that mattered. Theo listened with the kind of attention that made her feel heard, understood, valued. "She sounds incredible," he said when she finished. She used to say that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone who made you want to be better. Smart woman. Theo's fingers traced gentle patterns on her shoulder. "Do I make you want to be better?" Daria turned in his arms, studying his face in the fading light. "You make me want to be brave." "Brave enough for what?" "This." She reached up, framing his face with her hands. "Brave enough to fall for someone who could break my heart. Brave enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales can happen to girls like me." Theo's kiss was different this time. Deeper, more certain. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "Girls like you deserve every fairy tale ever written," he whispered. They spent the evening curled on his massive couch, talking and kissing and slowly, carefully, learning each other. When Theo finally led her to his bedroom, it was with the kind of reverence that made Daria feel precious, cherished. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice rough with want and restraint. "I'm sure," she whispered back, and meant it. They made love like they'd been building toward this moment for months, slowly, tenderly, with the kind of connection that went deeper than physical desire. Afterward, Daria lay in Theo's arms, listening to his heartbeat, feeling like she'd found something she didn't even know she'd been looking for. "What are you thinking?" Theo asked, fingers threading through her hair. "That I'm in trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble? The kind where there's no going back." She tilted her head to look at him. "I'm falling in love with you, Theodore Ashton Kingsley." His sharp intake of breath told her everything she needed to know before he spoke. "I fell for you the night we got locked in that bathroom," he said. "Everything since then has just been me trying to catch up to my heart." Saturday morning from Theo's loft was everything he'd promised. Golden light streaming through massive windows, coffee that tasted like heaven, and jazz drifting up from the street below. Daria wore one of his t-shirts and nothing else, and felt more beautiful than she had in her entire life. "I have to tell you something," Theo said, as they lingered over breakfast. Daria's stomach clenched. "What?" "My parents want to meet you." "What?" The fork slipped from her fingers. "How do they even know about me?" "Because I told them." Theo reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Because I'm tired of keeping the best thing in my life a secret." "Theo, I can't." Daria gestured at herself, at his apartment, at the vast differences between their worlds. "Your parents are going to take one look at me and know I don't belong." "You belong with me," Theo said firmly. "That's all that matters." But as Daria looked around his beautiful loft, reality came crashing back. Meeting his parents meant stepping fully into his world, with all the judgment and scrutiny that came with it, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that level of exposure. Not yet. Meeting the Kingsley family felt like preparing for battle. Daria stood in front of her tiny closet the following Friday, every outfit looking wrong for dinner at the commander's palace with New Orleans royalty. Too casual, too cheap, too obviously borrowed from Brielle's wardrobe. You're spiraling, Brielle observed from the bed, watching her sister's fashion crisis unfold. I'm being realistic. Daria held up a black dress that had seen better days. These people probably spend more on wine than I make in a month. So they're going to take one look at me and wonder what their son sees in the help. Brielle sat up, her expression serious. Listen to me, Dari. Theo chose you, not some debutante with a trust fund, not some society princess with the right last name. You, the woman who makes him laugh, who challenges him, who makes him want to be better. But what if nothing? Brielle stood, moving to the closet. You're Daria Rivers. You're brilliant, kind, funny, and you've worked for everything you have. If his parents can't see that, it's their loss. An hour later, Daria stood outside Commander's Palace in the navy dress she'd finally settled on. Simple, elegant, borrowed from a co-worker who was roughly her size. Theo waited by the entrance, devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. You look beautiful, he said, taking her hand. I look terrified. That too. His smile was gentle. Sure they're going to love you. How can you be so sure? Because I love you. The words hung between them, finally spoken in daylight, without the cover of passion or darkness. Daria's heart stopped, then started again at double time. Theo, I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take things slow, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is anything less than complete, terrifying, life-changing love. Before she could respond, the restaurant door opened and a couple emerged who could only be Theo's parents. His father was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and Theo's honey-brown eyes. His mother was elegant in the way that money and breeding could create, perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive jewelry, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Theodore, so his mother said, kissing his cheek. You look well. Mom, Dad, I'd like you to meet Daria Rivers. Theo's hand found the small of her back, a gesture of support and claim. Daria, these are my parents, Richard and Celeste Kingsley. Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley, Daria said, extending her hand. It's wonderful to meet you. Richard's handshake was firm, his smile genuine. Please, call me Richard. Theo's told us so much about you. Celeste's greeting was cooler, her assessment barely disguised as she took in Daria's appearance, her dress, her accent. How lovely. Shall we go in? Dinner was a minefield of careful conversation and loaded questions. Richard proved to be warm and engaging, asking about Daria's work with genuine interest. Celeste was more subtle, her inquiries seeming innocent, while clearly designed to establish social positioning. Where did you attend university, dear? Celeste asked over the soup course. I didn't finish, Daria replied honestly. Family circumstances required me to leave school. Oh, how unfortunate. What field were you studying? Education. I wanted to teach elementary school. How noble. The word carried just enough condescension to sting. And your family? Are they from New Orleans? Born and raised. My grandmother worked for the Belmont family for 30 years. Daria watched understanding dawn in Celeste's eyes, the recognition that Daria came from the serving class, not the served. The woman's smile became even more artificial. I see. How interesting. Under the table, Theo's hand found Daria's, squeezing gently, but she could feel him tensing beside her, recognizing his mother's tone. Daria's wellness program at the company has been revolutionary, Theo interjected. Employee satisfaction is up 20%, and we've seen a significant decrease in sick days and turnover. Wonderful, Richard said enthusiastically. It's about time someone focused on the human element of business. Indeed, Celeste agreed, though her expression suggested she found such concerns beneath notice. And tell me, Daria, what are your intentions regarding my son? The question landed like a slap. The entire table went silent, other diners, conversations filling the void. Mom, Theo warned, his voice low and dangerous. It's a fair question, Theodore. You've never brought a woman to meet us before. Daria felt every eye in the restaurant on their table, or maybe that was just her paranoia. Either way, she was drowning in the weight of expectation and judgment. I care about your son very much, she said carefully, but I think intentions are something Theo and I should discuss privately. Of course, dear. I just want to ensure you understand that Theodore has responsibilities to the family, to the business, certain expectations that come with his position. The message was clear. Know your place. I understand completely, Daria replied, her voice steady despite the storm building in her chest. "Excuse me for a moment." She escaped to the ladies' room, gripping the marble sink as she fought to control her breathing. This had been a mistake. She didn't belong in this world of subtle cruelties and polite warfare. The door opened behind her, and Celeste Kingsley entered like a queen surveying her domain. "You seem like a lovely girl," she said, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. "But surely you can see this infatuation of Theodore's is impractical." "Impractical. He's heir to a fortune, dear. The family name carries obligations, social responsibilities. He needs someone who can navigate those waters, support his position in society. Someone like you." Celeste's smile was sharp. "Someone of appropriate background and breeding, yes." Daria turned to face her fully. "With respect, Mrs. Kingsley, I think Theo is capable of making his own decisions about who he wants in his life. Perhaps, but ask yourself this. Do you really want to be the woman who holds him back, who reminds everyone that he chose emotion over wisdom?" The words hit their target perfectly, feeding every insecurity Daria had tried to suppress. She left the restroom feeling smaller, diminished, acutely aware of every difference between herself and the woman who'd raised the man she loved. When she returned to the table, Theo took one look at her face and stood. "We need to go," he announced. "But we haven't had dessert," Richard protested. "We're done here." Theo's voice brooked no argument. He helped Daria from her chair, his touch gentle despite the anger radiating from his frame. In the car, they sat in silence as Theo gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. "What did she say to you?" he asked finally. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." Daria stared out the window at the passing lights of New Orleans, each one blurring as tears she wouldn't let fall gathered in her eyes. "She's not wrong," she whispered. "What? Your mother? She's not wrong about us being impractical, about me not belonging in your world." Theo pulled over so quickly the car lurched. "Don't you dare let her poison what we have." "She didn't poison anything. She just made me see clearly." Daria finally looked at him, and the pain in his face nearly broke her resolve. "I love you. God help me. I love you so much it scares me, but love doesn't change reality." "What reality?" "That I'll always be the woman who doesn't fit, the one people whisper about, wondering what you see in me, the one who holds you back from the life your family expects." "Fuck what my family expects." "You can say that now, but what about in 5 years? 10? When you've missed opportunities because your wife isn't the right kind of asset?" Theo's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are not holding me back. You're the only thing that makes me want to move forward." And Daria believed him. In that moment, in that car, with his hands on her face and love shining in his eyes, she believed him completely. But belief and reality weren't always the same thing. The fight started small and escalated like a summer storm. 3 days after the disaster dinner with his parents, Theo appeared at Daria's apartment with flowers and an apology for his mother's behavior. But the damage was done. Celeste's words had taken root, growing stronger with each passing hour. "You've been different since Friday," Theo said, settling on her worn couch while Brielle pointedly disappeared into her bedroom. "Distant. I've been thinking about—" Daria gestured around her tiny apartment, the peeling paint, the mismatched furniture, the stack of bills on her kitchen counter that never seemed to shrink. "About this. About us. About whether we're being naive thinking this can work. We are making it work. Are we? Or are we just playing house until reality catches up?" Theo's expression darkened. "Is this about my mother? Because I can handle—" "This isn't about your mother." Daria paced the small space, energy crackling through her like electricity. "This is about me realizing that love isn't always enough." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that no matter how much we care about each other, I'm still going to be the woman who needs to check her bank balance before ordering an appetizer. You're still going to be the man whose monthly car payment is more than I make in 6 months. Since when does money matter to you?" "Since always." The words exploded out of her. "Since I was 8 years old, and my grandmother cried because she couldn't afford my school supplies. Since I was 16 and wore the same 3 outfits to school while other kids got new clothes every season. Since I was 22 and had to choose between my education and keeping my family afloat." Theo was quiet, watching her with the kind of careful attention that usually made her feel heard. Tonight, it felt like dissection. "Money has always mattered, because not having it shapes every decision you make," she continued. "And you can't understand that because you've never lived it. So teach me. I can't teach you 29 years of experience in an evening, Theo." Then what are you saying? That we should break up because we come from different backgrounds? The question hung between them like a blade. Daria sank onto the couch beside him, suddenly exhausted. I'm saying that maybe your mother is right. Maybe we're too different for this to work long term. My mother is a snob who judges people by their tax brackets. Theo's voice was sharp with anger. I thought you were stronger than letting her opinions matter. This isn't about her opinions. This is about facing facts. What facts? That you offered me a job because you felt sorry for me, that you pay for dinner because you know I can't afford to split the check, that everything about our relationship is colored by the financial imbalance between us. Theo stood abruptly, pacing to the window. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time I paid for anything? When was the last time you let me contribute equally to this relationship? I don't care about money. That's exactly the problem. Daria's voice cracked. You don't care about money because you've never not had it. You can afford to be generous because generosity doesn't cost you anything. So I'm supposed to apologize for having money? No, you're supposed to understand that having it makes you different from people who don't. They stared at each other across her small living room, the distance feeling like an ocean. In the silence, Daria could hear Brielle's TV through the thin walls, the couple upstairs arguing about groceries, the normal sounds of people living normal lives. What do you want from me? Theo asked finally. I want you to stop trying to fix my problems with your checkbook. I want to feel like an equal partner instead of a charity case. You're not, aren't I? Daria's smile was bitter. The job offer, the dinner invitations, the way you insist on paying for everything, how is that different from charity? Theo was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was careful. What if I told you I need you more than you need me? What? What if I told you that before I met you, I was sleepwalking through my life, going through the motions, taking medication just to feel human, wondering if there was any point to any of it? Daria felt her anger deflating, replaced by something more complicated. You changed that, Theo continued. You made me remember what it feels like to want something beyond just surviving. You make me laugh, you challenge me. You see me, not my bank account or my family name, but me, Theo. So, if you want to talk about who needs whom, about who's getting more out of this relationship, I think you're looking at it backwards. He moved closer, sitting beside her on the couch, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I love you, he said simply. Not because I feel sorry for you, not because I'm trying to fix you, but because you're the first person who's ever made me feel like I'm enough exactly as I am. Daria's defenses crumbled like sand. I love you too. That's what makes this so hard. Then why are we fighting? Because I'm scared. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you could have anyone, and you'll wonder why you chose someone who comes with so many complications. Theo's hands framed her face gently. The only complication is the one you're creating right now. Your parents will learn to accept you or lose their son, their choice. Your friends will see what I see if they matter. If they don't, they were never really friends. Society can go to hell. Despite everything, Daria smiled. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. I love you. You love me. Everything else is just noise. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Daria felt the fight drain out of her, leaving behind the truth she'd been avoiding. She was scared, terrified actually, but not of his money or their differences or what other people thought. She was scared of how much she loved him, of how desperately she wanted this to work, of how much it would destroy her if it didn't. I don't know how to do this, she whispered against his lips. Do what? Love someone who could break my heart. Then we'll figure it out together. Theo's smile was soft, understanding. One day at a time. But even as she melted into his arms, even as they found their way back to each other with kisses and whispered apologies, Daria couldn't shake the feeling that love alone might not be enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. Some differences ran deeper than the heart could reach. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning in the worst possible way. Daria was reviewing wellness program applications when her phone exploded with notifications, text messages, missed calls, social media alerts, all pointing to the same devastating reality. Someone had leaked photos of her and Theo together, along with details about their relationship that could only have come from inside sources. The headline on the local business blog made her stomach drop. Thorne Pharmaceuticals CEO in secret romance with employee, workplace ethics or exploitation. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the article, which painted their relationship as a textbook case of workplace harassment. The photos were carefully chosen, Theo helping her into his expensive car, the two of them at dinner at an upscale restaurant, him kissing her goodnight outside her modest apartment building. The contrast was stark and damaging. The powerful CEO and the struggling receptionist, wealth and poverty, privilege and desperation. Miss Rivers, Theo's assistant, appeared in her doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Kingsley needs to see you immediately." The walk to his office felt like a death march. Every employee she passed seemed to be whispering, their eyes following her with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. By the time she reached Theo's door, her entire body was trembling. She found him behind his desk, tie loosened, hair disheveled, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. Legal documents were spread across his desk, and his phone buzzed constantly with calls he wasn't answering. "Close the door," he said without looking up. Daria did, then stood awkwardly in front of his desk, unsure whether to sit or flee. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad." Theo finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes nearly brought her to her knees. "The board is meeting in an hour. Legal is recommending we both make statements denying any impropriety." Meaning they want us to say this was all a misunderstanding, that there was never a romantic relationship between us. Daria felt something cold settle in her stomach, and if we don't, then I'm facing potential removal as CEO for ethics violations, and you're looking at wrongful termination lawsuits from employees who think you got preferential treatment. The room spun slightly. Everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for, crumbling because someone had decided their love was newsworthy. "Who did this?" she asked. "We don't know yet. Someone with access to the building. Someone who knew our routines." Theo's jaw clenched. "Legal thinks it might be an employee looking for a payday from the tabloids. Or your mother." The words slipped out before Daria could stop them. Theo's expression went very still. "What?" "She made it clear she didn't approve of me, that she thought I was holding you back. My mother would never—" He stopped, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "She wouldn't do this to her own son, wouldn't she? If she thought she was protecting the family legacy." Before Theo could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his face went white. "It's the board chair." He looked at Daria with something that might have been desperation. "What do we do?" In that moment, looking at the man she loved facing the destruction of everything he'd worked for, Daria made the hardest decision of her life. "Yes, we tell the truth." "Daria, no, listen to me." She moved around the desk, taking his hands in hers. "We tell them that yes, we're in a relationship. Yes, it started after I got the wellness coordinator position. Yes, we followed proper HR protocols by disclosing it to the appropriate personnel." "Did we?" "We will right now, today." She squeezed his hands. "We tell them that what we have is real, consensual, and none of their damn business." Theo's phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. "They'll destroy us," he said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll respect us for being honest. And if they don't? If I lose the company?" Daria's heart broke a little at the defeat in his voice. "Then you'll find something else. Something that doesn't require you to hide who you are or who you love." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one losing a multi-million-dollar inheritance." The words hit like a physical blow. Daria dropped his hands, stepping back as if he'd slapped her. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not, because I've never had anything to lose." "Daria, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Her voice was steady, controlled, even as her world collapsed around her. And you're not wrong. This is your legacy, your family's company, your entire future. I'm just the woman who's fucking it all up." "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Theo stood, reaching for her, but she backed away. "Don't. Just don't." "We can figure this out," he said desperately. "Together, we can face the board, explain everything." "No." Daria's voice was firm, final. "We can't, because deep down, you know they're right. You know this was always going to end badly." "I don't believe that." "Then why did you just throw my poverty in my face the moment things got difficult?" Theo flinched, as if she'd struck him. "I was scared. I said something stupid because I was scared." "And what happens the next time you're scared? The next time choosing me costs you something important." Daria moved toward the door, each step feeling like walking through quicksand. "So I won't be the reason you lose everything, Theo. I won't be your regret. You could never be my regret." She paused with her hand on the doorknob, looking back at him one last time. He stood behind his massive desk in his expensive suit, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and power that had always separated them. I could be, she said softly. And someday you might let me be. Daria, please. But she was already gone, walking out of his office, out of the building, out of the life she'd been foolish enough to think could be hers. Behind her, she heard Theo's phone start ringing again, the sound following her all the way to the elevator. The resignation letter was simple, professional, devastating. Dear Mr. Kingsley, please accept this as my formal resignation from my position as wellness coordinator, effective immediately. While I have enjoyed my time at Thorne Pharmaceuticals, recent circumstances make it impossible for me to continue in this role. I wish you and the company all the best. Sincerely, Daria Rivers. She left it on her desk along with her security badge and the key to the office that had felt like hope for exactly 6 weeks. At home, Brielle took one look at her face and didn't ask questions. She just made tea, turned off her phone, and sat beside her sister while Daria cried for the future she'd been brave enough to want and foolish enough to believe in. It's not over, Brielle said finally. Yes, it is. Love like that doesn't just die because of one fight. It does when the fight reveals everything that was wrong from the beginning. Daria wiped her eyes with the tissue Brielle handed her. We were living in a fantasy, pretending that love could overcome everything. Maybe it can. Maybe it can't. Daria pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. But maybe some differences are too big to bridge. Her phone buzzed with another call from Theo. She'd stopped answering after the 15th attempt. He's been calling all evening, Brielle observed. I know. You're not going to talk to him. What's the point? So he can tell me he's sorry, so we can pretend this was all a misunderstanding. Daria shook her head. The moment things got hard, he reminded me exactly where I stand in his world. Below his money, below his company, below his comfort. He was scared. So was I, but I didn't throw his privilege in his face when I got scared. Brielle was quiet for a moment. So what now? Now I figure out how to start over. Again. That night, Daria lay in her bed listening to the sounds of her neighborhood. Sirens in the distance, the couple upstairs fighting about money, the familiar symphony of people struggling to make it through another day. This was her world, had always been her world. For a few magical weeks, she'd thought she could live in both worlds, his and hers, wealth and want, love bridging every gap. But bridges could collapse under too much weight, and their love, beautiful as it was, hadn't been strong enough to carry them both. Her phone buzzed one more time with a text from Theo. I love you. That hasn't changed. Nothing else matters. But as Daria turned off her phone and pulled her grandmother's quilt up to her chin, she knew that sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes everything else mattered more. 6 months later, the coffee shop in the Marigny was exactly the kind of place Daria had always loved. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She sat at her usual table by the window, grading papers from her student teaching assignment at the local elementary school. Going back to school had been terrifying and expensive, and absolutely worth it. The tuition assistance program at her new job, a non-profit focused on educational equity, barely covered the costs, but she was making it work. She always made it work. Ms. Rivers. Daria looked up to find one of her students, 8-year-old Marcus, tugging on his grandmother's hand. This is my teacher, he announced proudly. She's the best teacher in the whole world. Is that so? The grandmother smiled warmly. Well then, she must be very special. She is. She reads us stories and helps with math, and she never gets mad when we ask too many questions. Daria felt her heart swell. This, teaching, shaping young minds, being part of something bigger than herself, this was what she was meant to do. You better get home, she told Marcus. And remember, practice those sight words we talked about. I will. He waved enthusiastically as his grandmother led him away. Daria was packing up her papers when a familiar voice made her freeze. He's right. You know, you are the best teacher in the world. She turned slowly, and there he was. Theodore Ashton Kingsley, standing in her coffee shop in jeans and a simple sweater, looking like he belonged in her world instead of the other way around. Theo. His name came out as barely a whisper. May I sit? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He looked good, healthier somehow, less burdened by the weight of expectations she remembered. I heard you went back to school, he said, settling across from her. Sean, I'm proud of you. How did you hear that? Brielle might have mentioned it when she came to pick up some things from the office. Brielle came to see you. She did. Told me I was an idiot for letting you go. His smile was rueful. Among other, less flattering observations, they sat in awkward silence, 6 months of separation and hurt between them like a wall. "How are you?" Daria asked finally. "Different. Better, I think." Theo adjusted his watch, that nervous habit still intact. "I left Thorne Pharmaceuticals." "What?" The shock in her voice was audible. "You left the company. Turns out you were right about a lot of things, including the fact that I was living someone else's dream." He leaned forward. "I started my own foundation, educational initiatives, healthcare access for underserved communities, using the family money to actually help people instead of just accumulating more." "Theo, that's amazing. I couldn't have done it without you, without everything you taught me about seeing people instead of profit margins." Daria felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm happy for you, really." "Are you happy for you?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you happy? Teaching, living your life, being exactly who you're meant to be?" She considered the question seriously. "Yes, I am. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters to me, something that's mine." "Good." His smile was genuine, warm. "You deserve to be happy. So do you." They sat quietly, watching people come and go, the comfortable silence of two people who had loved each other well, even if they couldn't make it work. "I need to tell you something," Theo said eventually. "About that day when everything fell apart. Theo, please, let me say this." He took a deep breath. "What I said about you not having anything to lose, it was cruel and wrong, and I've regretted it every day since. You were scared. People say things when they're scared. That's not an excuse. You deserved better from me. You deserved someone who would fight for you instead of throwing your circumstances in your face." Daria felt the old hurt surface, but somehow it felt smaller now, less sharp. "We both said things we didn't mean." "Did we?" Theo's honey-brown eyes searched her face. "Because I meant it when I said I loved you. I still mean it." The words hung between them like a bridge Daria wasn't sure she was ready to cross. "Theo, I know. I know we're different people now, that we've both moved on. I just needed you to know that loving you changed me in all the best ways, that even though we couldn't make it work, I don't regret a single moment of what we had." Daria felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I don't regret it either." "Good." He stood, leaving money on the table for both their coffees. "I should let you get back to your papers." He was halfway to the door when Daria called his name. "Theo." He turned back, hope flickering in his expression. "Would you like to get coffee sometime, just to catch up?" His smile could have powered half the city. "I'd like that very much." "Good, because there's something I want to tell you too." "What's that?" "You're not the same man I fell in love with 6 months ago." She paused, gathering courage. "You're better, stronger, more yourself. Is that a good thing?" "It's the best thing." As Theo walked away, Daria pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart do that familiar flutter that meant possibility, that meant hope, that meant maybe, just maybe, some stories got second chances. She wasn't the same woman who had fallen apart in his office 6 months ago either. She was stronger now, more sure of who she was and what she wanted. She had her own life, her own dreams, her own path. And maybe that was exactly what they both needed to be before they could try again. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. But for the first time in months, Daria Rivers was brave enough to believe in fairy tales again. The end. Have you ever had to choose between love and your own self-worth, between what your heart wanted and what your mind knew was practical? Daria and Theo's story shows us that sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes it means finding each other again, when you're both strong enough to meet as equals. What would you have done in Daria's shoes? Would you have fought harder for the relationship, or would you have walked away to protect your heart? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.